10, 9, ignition sequence.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
1, 0, and liftoff.
Mission complete, Houston. After serving the world for over 30 years, the space shuttle earned its place in history and has come to a final stop.
And here we go. Hatches are open.
The 3 newest residents of the International Space Station were greeted by their Expedition 31 crewmates after their Soyuz capsule docked safely with the orbiting laboratory following its 2-day-plus journey from Kazakhstan. Soyuz Commander Gennady Padalka, NASA flight engineer Joe Akaba, and Russian flight engineer Sergei Revin are slated to spend the next 5 months on the station. Expedition 31 will conclude and 32 will begin when Oleg Kononenko, Andrei Kuipers, and Don Pettit return to Earth on July 1st after spending more than 6 months aboard the ISS.
Good morning, this is Mission Control Houston. Welcome and thank you for joining us for today's edition of ISS Update this Thursday, May 17. We're coming to you live inside the International Space Station Flight Control Room, where the team has been monitoring the systems aboard the station and supporting the day's activities of the Expedition 31 crew members. Leading the Orbit 2 team here in the Station Flight Control Room today is Flight Director Jed Freeling, and next to him is Anna Fisher, who is serving as Capcom. She's been relaying all ground messages up to the crew. Aboard the orbiting complex, Station Commander Oleg Kononenko and flight engineers Andrei Kuipers and Don Pettit, who are in their 21st week in space, welcomed 3 new crew members aboard the orbital home last night. Russian cosmonauts Gennady Padalka, Sergei Revin, and NASA astronaut Joe Akaba aboard the Soyuz O-4M spacecraft docked to the space station after their successful launch from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan late Monday night. After a 2-day chase on orbit, the Soyuz spacecraft docked to the Poisk module of the space station last night at 11:36 p.m. Central Time, as the 2 vehicles were flying over the Mongolian border with Kazakhstan. While anticipating their 3 new crew members, Kononenko, Kuipers, and Pettit began their day with a wake-up at 8:30 Central Time last night to support the arrival of their new crew members who joined them aboard the International Space Station after a series of leak and pressure checks, and the hatches between both vehicles were opened early this morning at 3:10 Central Time. The new trio joined the crew for a greeting ceremony and conference with family and mission officials, then conducted a safety briefing afterward. It is now back to business for the current station residents, while their newly arrived crewmates begin several days of familiarization tasks as they adjust to life aboard the orbital laboratory. The docking occurred on Akaba's 45th birthday. In his first daily planning conference aboard the space station, Akaba told ground controllers around the world, "I couldn't have wished for a better birthday present." Akaba had previously visited the station in March 2009 aboard the Space Shuttle Discovery as an STS-119 mission specialist. This is Padalka's 4th long-duration spaceflight and his 3rd aboard the station. His first mission was aboard the Russian space station Mir, while Revin is making his first trip into space. Awaiting for their new crewmates to join them aboard the International Space Station, Commander Kononenko, Kuipers, and Pettit had launched to the orbiting complex aboard their Soyuz spacecraft as the Expedition 30 crew in December of last year. Their vehicle docked to the Rosviet module of the space station 2 days after their launch on December 23rd. Today, the trio will complete their 149th consecutive day, nearly 5 months in space. Kononenko, Kuipers, and Pettit had adjusted their sleep shift with an earlier wake-up at 8:30 p.m. last night to accommodate the successful docking at 11:36 p.m. The space station with its crew aboard and the Soyuz TMA O-4M now docked is now flying at an altitude of about 245 statute miles. The orbiting facility is on a night pass on a northeastern track, having made its way across the southern Australia about 15 minutes ago, is now across the North Pacific Ocean, heading toward an orbital sunrise and eventually a pass across Canada. Kononenko, Kuipers, and Pettit had adjusted their sleep shift with that earlier wake-up at 8:30 p.m. last night. They began their active long day with the first of 2 daily planning conferences a couple of hours after their wake-up. These planning conferences are held with ground controllers at mission control centers around the world to review the day's activities and also plan for the next set of tasks. The task at the top of the list being the arrival of their new crew members. Along with the arrival of the Soyuz today, Pettit worked with the Spheres experiment, troubleshooting the reference clock. He also replaced a manifold bottle in the combustion integrated rack experiment and observed microbial samples for the environmental health system microbial capture device. Kuipers worked on the water recovery system to prepare for water transfers, and he performed flow measurements on the temperature and humidity control, the intermodule ventilation system. And new to the station, NASA astronaut Joe Acaba spent some time setting up his crew quarters area. The 6-member expedition crew is now settling down in their pre-sleep period aboard the space station as they prepare for 14 hours of rest that will adjust their sleep back to the normal station operations clock for their first full day of work together as a full crew aboard the orbiting complex tomorrow. The crew is scheduled to go to bed just at the end of today's update hour at 11 a.m. Central Time. This is Mission Control Houston. Hi, welcome to the International Space Station Flight Control Room. I have an exciting person here to visit us today, guest NASA astronaut Katie Coleman. Katie, thank you so much for coming today.
I'm happy to be here.
So we're having all kinds of great stuff happening aboard the International Space Station. I'm so glad that you came here. First, Katie she was the Expedition 2627 flight engineer aboard the International Space Station. She is a veteran of 3 space flights, so 2 of which were aboard the Space Shuttle, STS-73 and STS-93. And but most recently, she was living aboard the International Space Station, where she stayed for 159 days. That's a long time. So we are so very, very glad to have you here. And we just want to get into talking about all this stuff. Actually, another little tidbit. Katie actually, in a year, or it will have been a year, in exactly 1 week from today, when she actually returned to Earth. I cannot believe it's been a year since you've been back.
It goes so fast once you get back. It's amazing to me as well, and it's really just neat to see docking and to remember back to, just a year and a half ago arriving at the station.
Wow, and it's so exciting to see, just to be able to see the crew members who are aboard the station and being able to see those visitors come on board. And now I know you actually docked and joined a crew that was there, but at the time that you were there, you also received visitors on 2 shuttle visits that came up there. So tell me first, what is that like to dock and join the crew, but also to receive visitors? What is that like as a crew member aboard the space station?
Well, I tell people that we go up in groups of 3, but we make a crew of 6. And it's interesting. You'd think we'd spend a lot of time together, the 6 of us, but really the 3 of us that go up in the Soyuz spend a lot of time together. And we do, the emergency practicing and all that kind of stuff with the other folks that we're going to join on board. But in some cases, especially with the Russian crew members, we don't know them really quite as well. And so the minute you get on board, you're kind of saying hello to some people you don't really know incredibly well. But what is amazing is that you're all there for the same purpose. And these guys that we joined, we joined Sasha Kaleri, Oleg Skripochka, and Scott Kelly, and they were just so happy to have us on board, I think because they loved being on board, and they loved the work that they were doing, and they just couldn't wait to, drag 3 more people into it and have us all just producing a lot of good science for the station.
Help and work together and see some new faces, I'm sure, as well, is probably nice to have on board this space station after so long. And I guess, while you didn't know each other as well throughout the training process and beforehand, but once you get there, I'm sure you get to know each other a little better, living there aboard the space station together.
It's really true, and I think being on the station at all is such an amazing experience. And in fact, after, 159 days, I really would have stayed another 6 months in a minute. I mean, I did want to come home eventually, but it never gets old there. It's never boring. You're always busy, and it's an amazing place. And I'm always driven to share that, and I think all of us are. And when a new crew comes aboard, it's this great opportunity to say, look at this, and look at this, and can you believe we get to do this? I mean, it's just, it's really pretty neat. I remember the night that we actually docked. I mean, we have a lot of simulators here at NASA, and they all simulate the space station in certain ways, but not exactly visually. You know, and I was focusing as we docked on the camera, on the screens that give all the data about how the docking is going. And in the simulator, I never think to look out the window, because what am I going to see? You know, some fake space station out there. So when I looked over and saw the actual space station, and it's just so clear and crisp because there's no atmosphere in between your window and the space station, I was so excited, and we just could barely wait through all the leak checks to get the hatches open and then come inside.
Well, that makes me think of something too. So you're talking about the end of that 2-day journey, but there is a 2-day journey from the time that you launched, just as there was for Padaka, Revan, and Akaba. They launched Monday night, Monday night, and then docked to the station late last night. So tell me a little about that journey. What is that like? Because it's literally 2 days. What are you doing? You're in very close quarters aboard the Soyuz, and you're just orbiting until you get to the space station. So I can imagine getting there is pretty exciting for you guys, but what are you doing during that 2-day journey?
Well, there's always more room than you would think. As soon as you hit zero gravity, which is 8.5 minutes after launch, then everything, including you, is floating around if you're not strapped in, which we do start off that way. And we have a little compartment that has, you know, basically a lot of cargo strapped to it, but it's, you know, it's about as sort of big as this little area right around, you know, sort of in a VW bug-sized area right around us. So there is some room there. So I don't really feel crowded, and it's more, you know, we waited so long to go to space, and then there we are in this tiny little capsule, just the three of us, Dimitri, Palinespoli, and I, and it's really an incredible view. I mean, it's spinning a little bit, so it's sort of rotating, and you're looking at the Earth, and the Earth is coming into view and going out, and coming into view and going out, and I found it to be actually amazingly intimate, really. I mean, in a space shuttle, it's just such a big vehicle. There's a lot between you and space, whereas in the Soyuz, when it's just the three of you, I really found this very special experience, just to be able to kind of, as a human, look out and realize that I was in a very special place, and I had some time to relax before it was time to get to work on the station.
Yeah, well, that's very interesting, because I would just think I would go out of my mind being that close. But it's nice to know that at least you have that a little bit of space, so it's not quite as cramped. It's not what we see, you know, on the launch video, when we see on the inside everyone in the right seat, the center seat, and the left seat. You know, you're not like that the entire time. So it's good to know that you have a little bit of mobility.
You know, we definitely do, and we have actually all the amenities as well. You know, we have a bathroom, you know, works fine, and there's enough room that two people could go downstairs into the Soyuz, where small, you know, if you need some privacy. We have food, we've got a window, and we've got just, I don't know, we had some cameras to be able to take some pictures, and even just a little bit of sort of studying what is our cargo, where is it, how are we going to unpack it, and a little sleeping too. I think that time before launch is pretty long.
Yeah.
And just tiring, and so we caught up on our sleep. Everybody on our crew felt actually just great, so we just had a nice time in those 2 days.
Sure, I can imagine with the adrenaline rush of launch and that sort of thing. After a while, you just kind of settle down and get ready for sleep. So I can see that. Now, once you do dock, and you were talking about, we just can't wait to get the hatches opening. Can you just explain, once you dock? So, for example, last night, the Soyuz 04M docked to the space station at 11:36 p.m. Central Time last night, but the hatches won't open until 3:10 in the morning. Can you explain what takes that time to before you? I mean, it's not like, honey, I'm home, and open up the doors. So explain why. You know, I understand there's some leak and pressure checks. So what is going on before the hatches are open?
Well, the way our spacecraft connects to the station, it's kind of like having a front hall of a house. You know, and so let's say Scott and Sasha and Oleg are inside the house, not in the front hall. They're inside the house, and then we basically come to the front door of the house and attach there. But before we want to open our hatch, we want to make sure we have a really good seal. So we're actually going to check our seal between the Soyuz and the front door of the house, and then we're going to check this. We're actually going to check the pressure inside the front hall. So everything has to be checked to make sure that when we do open that hatch, that we have a really good seal between us and the inside of the station. I mean, we don't want the station to lose any air, and we can actually, back away and then come back in if we needed to, if for some reason we didn't have a good seal. But the way that Soyuz is designed, if you dock, I mean, there's sort of a probe that sort of draws you in, and then there's hooks that pull you in. You're going to have a good seal, but we just make sure we check the pressure. We have pressure sensors out there, in the front hall, pressure sensors inside our Soyuz, and we actually, just see that the pressure holds before we open the doors, and that you want to be really sure, so it just takes a couple hours to do.
Wow. Okay. Well, thank you for explaining that, because I don't think a lot of people understood why, why can't you just get there and open the door and be there? And I can imagine just the anticipation, but certainly we can understand the reasons behind that. There are some safety issues and that sort of thing. So speaking of safety, one of the first orders of business after you get aboard and you're excited and you see each other and there's a welcome ceremony, you're also able to conference with family on the ground who had been actually traveled to Russia to see you guys off. What is that like?
It's so marvelous to see your family and to be able to actually, know that they can see you. And my husband and my son who's 11 and my son who's 28 had all traveled to the launch. And it was just neat to be able to wave to them and say hello and and feel a little bit close. I mean, here I finally got there, and it's hard to believe that a human being really does get to leave the planet and then go live on a space station, and getting to just say hi to your family, and it just was neat. I some of my favorite pictures are actually pictures that they sent me of my family in mission control talking to me, and for example, Dima's son said, Papa, will you bring a toy home for me? So to them, it's just nice to connect as well, and I got to say hello to some friends, and it's kind of that time of being a little connected to the Earth before you're really just, isolated up in space.
Sure, and I know that you are able to stay connected throughout your mission as well. But it is, I can imagine, nice, especially after your family. Again, when you mentioned they were talking to you in mission control, it's mission control in Moscow, so at that center, and so they stay a few days afterward and wait for your journey for you to arrive at the space station. So it's an amazing adventure, I'm sure, for both sides, you as well as the family as well. Now, also, one of the first order of business after the family conference, the welcome ceremony, is first and foremost the safety briefing. Can you walk through what exactly does that entail?
This is similar to getting on an airplane. And the flight attendants always explain, where are the exits and how are you going to know how to find the exits and where your flotation device is. Well, we actually learn all that stuff before we leave home. And so we know that. But it's somehow different to see it in the real space station in a floating around kind of environment. And I say floating, but really it's about flying around. And for example, when we do simulations, which we do really a lot of emergency simulations, there are in the ceiling, so to speak, of the Japanese module, that's where one of the fire extinguishers is. Well, in a practical sense, here on the ground, I'm not tall enough to reach up and get that, and that fire extinguisher is going to be heavy. So in a simulation, it's just going to be, on the floor or next to where the real place is. And when I say I'm going to go get that fire extinguisher, what I do is I go up and I tap that panel, and then I get it from the real place. But it's still not the same as really seeing where everything is. And it's literally a tour of the fire extinguishers, of the extra oxygen masks, of where the computers really are. Even though we actually know it intellectually, it's important to really experience that. And that's why, we don't just say we're going to have a fire drill in an elementary school. We actually have fire drills so the kids can really practice. You can really do it. And we do those kinds of exercises on board as well while we're up there to make those kinds of things real to us in case we need to do them.
Sure. Now, also, so today, the Padaka, Revan, and Akaba are going through some familiarization tasks. So can you explain exactly, the adjusting to gravity, what exactly are they doing to familiarize themselves?
Well, my first, recollection is actually Scott Kelly was our, guy who was already on board, and then together we became the 3 USOS, United States Operating System, or segment crew members. And Scott was just so excited to show us everything. He'd go, okay, so when you're going to do water sampling, okay, it's going to have, 3 pages of directions. But really the important things to notice are, is this thing plugged in? And make sure you see this before you turn it on. And, but of course, we're going to start with the real players. We're going to start with the bathroom. And so we had a bathroom tour. I mean, it all works pretty well. But again, we've trained here on the ground, and this bathroom is an engineering system, right? But it just helps to have somebody show you in real life, this is how it works. This is the noises it makes sometimes. Don't worry about that noise. Do worry about this noise. We're up there together, and these systems are really important. So, we're pretty candid about these things. And, Scott would say, listen, if you ever see, this or this, I don't care if I'm asleep. You wake me up, and we'll solve that problem together. We'll talk to the ground. But don't be shy about it. So, we're establishing those kinds of relationships in real life, and also just a tour. We're seeing the exercise equipment. We're seeing the cupola. We're making sure we understand how to open and shut the windows, how they really feel, what's all the way closed, what's all the way open. A lot of very practical kinds of
Well,
things.
and I can imagine even, the tour is kind of beneficial, especially for someone like you, because you weren't there. You had been there before, and it looked very, very different when you came back, when you returned. And so there were some new things aboard the space station. You want to talk about what was new when you got there?
Well, for me, it was actually all new in that my particular missions that I had been on, I had never been to the station.
Oh, that's right. You were
I had a
starting during
laboratory mission, which was literally a mock-up of doing experiments. I mean, it was our proving ground for a lot of experiments and how to do experiments up there. And then we launched the Chandra. So I had never been to the station before. So it was all kind of new. So to me, just seeing it big and wonderful, and I tell kids it's like, 8 school buses all strung together in a line, or, one big long train of about 8 train cars. So it's actually pretty big. But, so I never felt closed in there, and it was also just nice to have my own little place there. I had my own cabin, and Scott was just really nice. I mean, it was kind of like going to visit somebody, and they haven't had company in a little while, and he's just all excited about having guests. And he made sure that our beds were ready and that all our stuff was lined up so we could find it. It was just really, really nice of him and pretty cute.
So, well, let's talk about this. You were talking about your having your beds ready in your little area. So I know also today Akaba was setting up his crew quarters. I'm going to talk about the crew quarters because you do have a private space. Describe for us, if you will, just a little bit about the size of that space, what is in that space, what do you do in that space?
Different folks are different. I think it depends how big they are. I can do everything and anything in my quarters, and even actually turn upside down if I'm curled up into a little ball. And there's times I like to sleep that way. So we have a sleeping bag that's kind of hanging on the wall. It's actually kind of tacked down in a couple places, and sometimes it's nice not to have it tacked down. And I would, wake up and look and see sort of a view and realize, oh, that's the bottom of the computer. I must be upside down. So in there, it's really our space. We, in general, have our own computer in there, so we can do email. We can actually have an internet protocol phone. I could call my family every day, which I did, I think, except for about 3 days. And with the door shut, it's very soundproof. And for me as a person, that was important. In that you can have a conversation with somebody on the ground, can do a little venting, which I think is pretty healthy, and just have a conversation that is private and personal, as private and personal as any cell phone call, even down here on the Earth.
Sure, and I can imagine that personal private space is very important to have, while you're at, but just as it is for anyone here on Earth, we all need our space. So it's very nice to know that you guys have that area, aboard the space station. So you also, I understand, are able to set up a laptop computer and that sort of thing as well, in that crew quarters. So you can...
Right, and probably when Joe arrived today, probably his computer is actually already all set there, and it already knows that it's going to be Joe's computer. There'll be a whole series of ways to attach stuff to the walls of the crew quarters, because that's the secret to being up there, is that everything is going to float around. And so we will maybe make like sort of a little lattice work of bungee cords that you can tuck things under, which is a little dangerous because when you pull something out, the rest of the bungee cord moves and something else will float out. But then we also have little Velcro patches, on the sides of the walls, so we can attach I would have like a little bag that would have, maybe my toiletries in there, just little, or notebooks. My notebook could stick to the wall. Try to put everything in the same place all the time so that you can always find it. And so Joe is making that place, just good for his stuff, and deciding, well, what things does he want to keep out towards the bathroom compartment, and what things does he want to keep there in his cabin. I usually would keep, a few, like a change of clothes in my cabin, my gym clothes, things like that. But then, the majority of my clothes, which are not too many, would be out in another place in the station. And then when I needed a new shirt, I'd go find one. But I didn't want to keep a lot of stuff in my cabin, or else it's just a mess.
Sure. And so you mentioned not too many. So how often did you get to change your clothes? Or how long did you wear, say, let's just say a shirt. How long would you wear a shirt?
It depends. I mean, I like to wear different stuff different days. So we had, I think, 12 shirts for 6 months. And so I would actually get a few of them out and wear a couple of them. And so basically I'd have sort of like, 3 shirts that were, you could think of them as either clean or dirty, and wear those until you basically spilled something on them, which isn't going to happen like this way. It's going to happen when something just from somebody, even yourself, just sort of squirts towards you and suddenly your shirt's got spots on it and it's just not as nice. So we usually have about 1 pair of pants a month. It sounds terrible, like it's not very much and that we would all be smelly, but we weren't. I mean, it just somehow don't get as dirty up there, although we do a lot of exercise and we have separate gym clothes, and we do change those, all the time. In fact, I was the exercise clothes police. I would go, boys, it's new gym clothes day.
It's time. That's great. Well, so let's just real quick. You asked, and I promised I would ask a question. So we're going to go, and we had polled Twitter for a few questions, and so I'm going to go ahead and ask one of those questions for them. The first question comes from Tyler Russell. What's your favorite space meal?
I like just kind of comfort food. I like things like beef stew and macaroni and cheese and, broccoli, stuff like that.
Now, I understand there is a favorite dessert. You want to talk about that one? I hear it from many of the astronauts, the cherry blueberry cobbler.
I did actually like those cobblers quite a bit, although a lot of our stuff has sort of a preservative kind of taste in it, so it will last forever and ever and not be bad. And after a little while, I have to say that I got a little tired of that taste.
I can imagine. So let's go with the second question. This one comes from Harper Gardner. What is the best or the worst part of your week aboard the ISS?
Well, the best is every single morning. Waking up. Our crew was kind of a late night crew, so we'd stay up late and then get up, right before the day started. So I would, set my alarm just a few minutes before our first daily conference, and I would have already read all the messages and things like that the night before, so I'd be ready. So I would just wake up, fly down the lab, go brush my teeth and everything, and my commute was 5 minutes and really only 30 seconds. So I just loved waking up every morning just going, I am going to work and I am flying through the lab. So I really liked that part. The worst part is just that there's so much good work to do, and it takes a frustratingly long time to do that work, especially because everything is flying around and you can lose things. You have to be so careful not to lose things. And not losing things is stressful. I find it stressful down here on the Earth, and especially so up there. And just, there's so much good science work to do that if you could just do it faster, we'd be discovering more things. And so I just felt a pressure to be working a lot.
Sure. So we talked about work, and you guys do have that red line that goes across the timeline, and you're constantly scheduled for every little thing. But let's talk about playtime or your spare time. And now I know one of the things that you are famous for, you are famous for this, was your flute playing there in space. And you actually, and I'll go ahead and pick this up, you actually brought one of your flutes with you. So talk to us a little about, I understand, I think you would spend time in the cupola and just explain where that is and what you would do, during your spare time.
Well, this is my actual flute that went to space, at least most of it. The top part is actually, I took the top part, a mouthpiece that is sort of generic for any flute, and I took one that belonged to the flute company, and they have it in a flute mobile where basically beginning flute students around the country get to put that mouthpiece of that flute, which has been, I think, 50, 60 million miles, in their flute, and they get to play part of the flute that went to space. But the rest of it is mine. And I played in the cupola, which is right in the middle of the space station, for a couple reasons. First of all, the windows, the view. getting to look out at the same time that I'm playing music. And I generally don't really play alone down here on the Earth. I play with people. So I brought music of some of my favorite folks to play with down here, which actually include other astronauts that Dan Burbank just landed. Chris Hadfield is about to be up on the station next December. Mickey Pettit is our singer, and her husband Don is up on the space station right now. And Steve Robinson was on the mission that actually installed the cupola. So when I'm up there playing and I'm listening to our band rehearse and playing along, they're up there with me. It was also a place that was good to play because it was in the middle of the station and everybody sleeps at either end of the station, so I knew I wouldn't wake anybody up.
That's great. It must be nice. So tell me real quick just a few things. I mean, aside from flute playing, what other things did you do? I actually saw a question on Twitter. I didn't bring that one here. I'll just throw it out there. But the question was, can you play tag on ISS? So I guess what they're asking, the question is really about your free time and how you interact with the others, as well. So explain some of that stuff. I mean, maybe, watching television or, dinner time or anything like that.
Different crews are going to be different, and I'm convinced that we will have new microgravity games, that are invented because we're up there. We would do things like, it's not about floating around, it's about flying, and so we'd have little contests to see who could go the furthest through the station without running into anything. In other words, have really good aim to be able to launch yourself, and that was pretty fun. Sitting around, we would actually do that, even though we sort of float around together, but it would get to be Friday evening, and you're really tired and kind of done thinking, and you've really been working really hard all week. And in general, we would kind of sit around and watch a movie together. It was something that our crew liked to do together. And then on Saturdays, we'd each kind of do our own thing, work our exercise in when we wanted to. A lot of corresponding with friends and family and trying to find ways to share. And I'd say you can never, do that quite enough. But it's never ever boring up there.
No, and honestly, I followed your mission, and you did a lot of things, of those extra things, in trying to share that story, and I think that even with the stuff that you did, and sent down to us and let us know, this is what you guys are doing up there. And like you said, it never gets boring. There's just never there's never too much that you can share with us, because there are so many things, and even from my point of view, being here, there's always something that I learn every day about what it's like on the space station, and what not working and living and that sort of thing. And I'm always surprised, because I'm thinking, wow, there's it doesn't get old, even from my standpoint. So I can't imagine being up there that it would get old for you. I'm going to go ahead and ask another Twitter question. So this third Twitter question comes from Dark Gengar. What one thing do you miss from Earth while living in space?
I missed family. I got to talk to them every day, and every week we would have a video conference, and we would even just do things, my son and I, like read. I would read. I had some books electronically, which was really, really nice up there, and I would actually read to him. Not every day, but many days. And in some ways, it kind of gave us this sort of little emotional space to be together. Because, I don't know, you can only talk to your mom every day for so many days. Like, hi, how was your day? Oh, my day was fine. Even though I'm doing cool things and he's doing cool things, it's just not what an 11-year-old wants to do. And so by just reading together, we just kind of give ourselves a way to sort of be together. So I would do some of that.
Yeah, that sounds great. So let's go ahead and ask the last question from Twitter, and then we're going to be close to wrap-up time here on today's ISS Update Hour. This question comes from Tara. Was it difficult to adjust to micro G and back to 1G? Which was harder?
Well, it's funny you should ask, because I have this image now that Joe and Gennady and Sergei are up there, that at least for us when we were new, okay, you get up there and you're so excited to be floating around, but you're a little bit clumsy, because every little movement sends you sailing. And I have this image in my mind of, Scott was the guy who was already aboard, and Paolo and I would, want to come over and ask him something, and so we would, race over there, and it's kind of like having a new puppy. That just like crashes through the entire house, and things are falling off the walls, and Scott is catching things and putting things back on the walls, and then we land at his feet and look up at him like, isn't this great? And he's thinking, yeah, great, except I'm picking up after you guys.
Here comes Katie.
But it happens to everybody. There's a certain amount of time it takes to get used to flying around
Sure.
up there.
Yeah.
And so Joe and his crewmates, probably not Gennady. Gennady will just remember how to just sail
this
through.
is his 4th time to be there in space.
And there is a certain memory. And that counts for coming home, too. I'd say it's harder to get used to coming home because you're just used to really gentle movements up in space, and then even walking is a pretty provocative movement. A lot of us are sick. I'll tell you, I was sick when I got home. But there's medicine that can help with that. And, right away, within a couple hours, I felt just fine. But sure, it takes a while to walk a straight line. And as for walking a straight line with your eyes closed, that takes quite a few days.
Wow. Well, great. Thank you so much for that. So we have time for one more question, and this is just my question. You were the robotics lead and science officer when you were aboard the space station, and I know you had many, many different vehicles. There were 2 space shuttles, the 3 Russian Progress supply ships, the ATV-2, that's the automated transfer vehicle. Now, it was automated, so you didn't have to worry about that docking, but then there was the Japanese Konatori, and you actually had to use the robotic arm to capture and pull that in. And the reason I want to ask about this is because there's some similarity with it and the upcoming SpaceX Dragon. That SpaceX Dragon is scheduled to launch on Saturday and morning at 3:55 in the morning Central Time. And so can you just tell me real quick what that experience was like using the robotic arm?
That was one of the highlights of the entire mission, and in fact I've been coaching or sharing with the guys who are on board right now about what it was really like, because there's things that just can't simulate. And just having that big supply ship, it's the size of a school bus, and the Dragon is just a little bit smaller than that, but it comes up and you see it as just a little speck coming closer and closer and closer, and then it gets really big, and it's like having that big giant bus drive right next to you, and then using the controls of the robotic arm. Paolo and I together, he's calling distance and I'm controlling the arm, and you reach out and grab that thing, and my heart was just pounding afterwards. It was just so exciting. But it's something we practice, and we practice what if this happens, what if this happens. And Don and Joe and Andre have practiced that as well, and they'll be great. But it's just kind of nice to share a little bit about what it's like with them, and even in terms of how we set up the cockpit, and how you can see bright outside and it's dark inside, and where to put your procedures, and how big it's really going to look. It's going to be so much fun.
And where from in the station are you working when you're doing the robotic arm?
So we are in the best place of the station. We're in the cupola doing that. And Nicole Stott did the first one, HTV-1. I did the second one. And we think, as long as Dragon is on time, that Don and Andre and Joe will do the third one. But if it's late, Sunny Williams will be up there.
That's right.
She'll do the grabbing. And there begins to be a trend. Nicole, Katie, Sunny, we might begin to suspect that only girls can grab supply ships with robotic arms.
There you go. You heard it here. Thanks so much. Again, that SpaceX Dragon launch is scheduled to take place on Saturday at 2:55 a.m. Central Time from the Kennedy Space Center. We'll have live coverage for you here on NASA television beginning at 2:30 a.m. Central Time. Katie, thank you so much for coming and out to talk with us. We'll be back here tomorrow for ISS Update during the regular time, 10 a.m. Central Time. Up next on NASA TV, a video file at 11 a.m. Central Time. This is Mission Control Houston.
Auf einer Pressekonferenz musste Berlins regierender Bürgermeister Klaus Wowereit heute erklären, dass sich die Eröffnung nicht nur um 2, sondern um 10 Monate verschiebt. Erst im März 2013 sollen nun die ersten Flugzeuge von dort starten. Der Grund? Offenbar sind nicht nur Mängel im Brandschutz aufgetaucht. Anne Rück-Sauerland berichtet.
Ein Bauvorhaben in Größe einer Kleinstadt. Eigentlich sollte hier am 3. Juni eine riesige Eröffnungsfeier stattfinden, die ersten Linienflüge starten. 40.000 Gäste waren dazu schon eingeladen. Doch jetzt kommt alles anders.
Nach intensiven Beratungen sind wir zu der Auffassung gekommen, dass dieser Eröffnungstermin liegen wird am 17. März des nächsten Jahres.
Ein Schuldiger ist auch gefunden, die schlechte Planung. Nicht nur beim Brandschutz sind inzwischen Probleme aufgetaucht. Der Technikchef des Bauvorhabens muss nun gehen. Aber egal, wer den schwarzen Peter nun hat, das Debakel wird teuer. Wie teuer genau, ist noch nicht abzusehen.
Das ist nicht zu beziffern. Wir wissen nicht, wer Regressansprüche geltend macht und ob sie erfolgreich sein könnten. Auch nicht jeder Anspruch wird ja erfüllt. Also insofern muss das bilanziert werden.
Gestern hieß es aber schon, die Flughafengesellschaft rechne mit Mehrkosten von etwa 15 Millionen Euro im Monat. Und das ohne mögliche Schadenersatzforderungen, die mit Sicherheit kommen werden. Zum Beispiel von Air Berlin-Chef Hartmut Mehdorn, der heute der deutschen Presseagentur erklärte, dies ist völlig unakzeptabel und fügt Berlin als Flughafendrehkreuz einen kaum mehr reparablen und deshalb unerträglichen Imageschaden zu. Ein neues Statussymbol für die Hauptstadt sollte er werden. Jetzt wird der neue Flughafen vermutlich erst einmal ein Fall für den Rechtsanwalt.
Good day and happy Friday. This is Mission Control Houston. You're joining us live inside the International Space Station Flight Control Room, where the team has been monitoring the systems aboard the station and supporting the day's activities of the Expedition 31 crew members. Leading the Orbit 2 team here in the Station Flight Control Room today is Flight Director Courtney McMillan, and next to him is NASA astronaut C.J. Sturkow, serving as Capcom. He's been relaying all ground messages up to the crew. Aboard the orbiting complex, Station Commander Oleg Kononenko and Flight Engineers European Space Agency astronaut Andrei Kuipers and NASA astronaut Don Pettit there on the right-hand side are now completing their 21st week in space. They also now have the help of 3 new crew members, flight engineers Russian cosmonauts Gennady Padalka, Sergei Revin, and NASA astronaut Joe Acaba, who joined them aboard the International Space Station early yesterday morning. They are shown here on the left-hand side. And now for a look back at this week in space. On Monday, Expedition 31 flight engineers Don Pettit and Andrei Kuipers worked to replace a failed global positioning system unit in the International Space Station's attitude control system on Monday. The GPS unit is needed for the impending arrival of the Spacex Dragon commercial spacecraft that is slated to arrive at the orbital laboratory later this month. Meanwhile, Pettit and Kuipers documented their meals and took water and urine samples for the energy experiment that studies methods for maintaining crew members' energy balance and for counteracting the effects of long-term exposure to the microgravity environment of space. Station Commander Oleg Kononenko worked with the radiation payload suite Matrishka, which is designed for sophisticated radiation studies and is named after the traditional Russian set of nested dolls. He also performed routine servicing of the SOJ environmental control and life support system in the Zvezda module, one of the station's treadmills as well. And on late Monday night at the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan, the Soyuz rocket with NASA astronaut Joe Acaba and cosmonauts Gennady Padalka and Sergei Revin launched into orbit at 10:01 p.m. Central Time aboard their Soyuz TMA-04M spacecraft to the International Space Station. And on Tuesday, the Expedition 31 crew of the International Space Station focused Tuesday on preparations for the arrival of those 3 new crewmates. Pettit and Kuipers both began their morning with the reaction self-test, a short reaction time task that allows the crew to track the effects of fatigue on performance before moving on to the day's activities. Kuipers then collected water samples throughout the station, testing some of the samples with the total organic carbon analyzer to check for any contamination and labeling others for return to Earth for additional study. Kuipers also unloaded additional cargo from the European Space Agency's Automated Transfer Vehicle 3, which delivered 7.2 tons of food, fuel, and supplies when it docked to the aft end of the Zvezda service module on March 28. Also on Tuesday, Pettit had participated in a session with the Sprint experiment as he conducted an ultrasound scan of his leg with remote guidance from the ground team. Sprint measures the effectiveness of high-intensity, low-volume exercise training in minimizing the loss of muscle mass and bone density that occurs during long-term exposure to weightlessness. Pettit performed a thorough cleanup of the overhead crew quarters, which are the closet-sized compartments built as small staterooms to give each crew member personal space to relax and sleep at night. Each crew quarters contain lighting, laptop connectivity, power, fans, ventilation, and a caution and warning system. And on the Russian side of the house, Kononenko worked with the typology experiment, which studies a crew member's psychophysical state during long-duration spaceflight. He conducted an MPEG-2 video test with the station's KU band communication system to make sure the live views of the Soyuz rendezvous and docking would be available to flight controllers later this week. The commander also gathered treadmill hardware for return to Earth aboard SpaceX's Dragon cargo craft that is set to launch tomorrow and arrive at the station next week. Again, that launch is scheduled to take place at 3:55 a.m. Central Time. And on Wednesday, the International Space Station's Expedition 31 crew had a shorter than normal workday Wednesday, going to bed early to prepare for the impending arrival of the 3 new crew members to the orbital complex. Station Commander Kononenko reviewed procedures for the opening of the hatch between the complex and the Soyuz spacecraft. He also gathered exercise tools for his new crewmates. On Wednesday, Pettit and Kuipers documented their meals and took water and urine samples for the energy experiment that studies methods for maintaining crew members' energy balance and for counteracting the effects of long-term exposure to the microgravity environment of space. The pair transferred cargo from the European Space Agency's Automated Transfer Vehicle 3, known as Eduardo Amaldi, and also spoke with European YouTube Space Lab participants at the European Astronaut Center in Cologne, Germany. Pettit and Kuipers spent some time reviewing docking data and procedures for the upcoming arrival of the SpaceX Dragon commercial cargo craft. And late Wednesday night, NASA astronaut Joe Acaba and Russian cosmonauts Gennady Padalka and Sergei Revin aboard their Soyuz TMA-04M spacecraft docked to the station's Poisk mini-research module at 11:36 Central Time Wednesday night. The trio joined the current station residents to begin a 4-month tour of duty aboard the orbiting complex when the hatches opened early Thursday morning at 3:10 a.m. Flight engineers Gennady Padalka, Joe Acaba, and Sergei Revin were welcomed aboard the orbiting laboratory after the hatches opened. All 6 crew members then participated in a greeting ceremony and conference with family and mission officials, followed by a safety briefing. The station crew members then performed a variety of post-docking operations and Soyuz transfers before returning to their regular science and maintenance activities. Pettit had worked with the Spheres experiment, troubleshooting the reference clock. He also replaced a manifold bottle in the combustion integrated rack experiment and observed some microbial samples for the environmental health system, the microbial capture device. Kuipers worked on the water resource system to prepare for water transfers and perform flow measurements on the temperature and humidity control intermodule ventilation system, also known as the Space Station Air Conditioner. Kononenko worked with the identification experiment, which examines the station's dynamic loads during events such as dockings and reboost. He also spent some time in the Russian segment of the station performing maintenance and monitoring its systems. Meanwhile, the newest station residents set up their crew quarters and began familiarization tasks as they adjust to life aboard the orbiting laboratory. And today, on Friday, Commander Kononenko set up the sound meter equipment and gathered noise level measurements within the complex. He performed a checkout of the Kuipers performed a checkout of the biolab glove box. Flight engineer Don Pettit checked the power supply on the new image processing unit and removed and replaced the pre-treat tank in the waste and hygiene compartment and transfers an Express laptop from the Express Rack 5 to Express Rack 7. On his first full day on the station, Acaba took some time for ISS crew orientation. He assisted Pettit with the pre-treat tank remove and replacement and powered on the ham radio in the Columbus module. He and Don Pettit then recorded video messages for later downlink. Acaba made his first journal entry as part of the journal study and participated in his first private medical conference aboard the space station. Kuipers worked with the Energy Medical Equipment Experiment. He inspected the portable emergency provisions. This is the portable fire extinguishers, the portable breathing apparatus, and extension hose T kits. He checked the biolab glove box, seals and gloves, and performed more troubleshooting on the Spheres clock. And today, the newly arrived crew members will continue to adapt to their microgravity environment and become acquainted with the exercise protocol aboard the space station. Inside the station's gym, there is a stationary bicycle, a treadmill, and a machine known as the Advanced Resistive Exercise Device that simulates weightlifting here on Earth. The Expedition 31 crew members will do some evening prep work before their evening meal and pre-sleep period. They also will participate in their final daily planning conference before bedtime. The crew is scheduled to go to bed at 4:30 p.m. Central Time. This is Mission Control Houston.
When the SpaceX Dragon spacecraft returns to Earth after its mission to the International Space Station, it will depend on a heat shield material called Pika-X to protect it during re-entry. The heat shield material, called phenolic impregnated carbon ablator, was developed in partnership with NASA Ames Research Center.
So we were looking for an advanced material that was lighter weight, could withstand more extreme environments, and would be essentially safer and more rugged for planetary missions.
Pika-X samples were tested at NASA Ames using special facilities to simulate planetary re-entry temperatures and high-speed atmospheric flows. During these tests, the surface temperature of the heat shield material reached approximately 3,450 degrees Fahrenheit, almost twice as hot as molten lava. Pika has proved its effectiveness on the heat shield that protected the Stardust capsule during its return to Earth in January of 2006. It'll be used by the Mars Science Laboratory to land its rover Curiosity on the Red Planet. And of course, when the first commercial cargo resupply mission to the ISS returns a payload safely back to Earth, Pika-X will have played a major role in Dragon's success.
Evaluation of a key component of the J2X engine continues at the Stennis Space Center. NASA recently conducted a long-duration test of the J2X power pack, a system of components on the top portion of the J2X engine that helps the engine produce thrust. The 340-second test was designed to operate the power pack turbopumps over a range of speeds by varying the gas generator valve positions. Continued testing of the J2X, which will help propel NASA's new Space Launch System, are scheduled through the summer. The SLS is the new heavy-lift launch vehicle that will expand human presence beyond low Earth orbit and, with the Orion crew capsule, enable new missions of exploration across the solar system.
I'm Jane Jett Gensler. I work in the International Space Station Program Office of External Integration at the NASA Johnson Space Center. I was born in Bangkok, Thailand, and I immigrated to the U.S. When I was about 2 or 3 years old, moved to Dallas, Texas, and I basically grew up there and went to school at the University of Texas at Austin. Got my chemical engineering bachelor's degree from UT. The International Space Station is a wonderful program. A lot of people in the general public don't know that we even have an International Space Station. So from that standpoint, our office does a lot of external communications, and we get out there, we do a lot of public outreach, making sure that the public is aware of all the benefits that ISS, has provided and is able to offer. We want to make sure that everybody knows that it's a manned station. We've been manned for over 10 years. We're up there 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, and we've provided great benefits to humankind, and we're still doing that with all the utilization that we're currently ramping up. We've completed assembly, and we're working on all the research that's going to help us go and explore beyond low Earth orbit. One of the most fun things I've done out here at NASA is I was able to go and watch a Soyuz launch out in Kazakhstan. I love to travel, especially as a family, love to travel outside the country. But this was the first time I've traveled that far away, I guess, to an exotic location other than Thailand, where I'm from. Just being there and being a part of human space flight was amazing.
And liftoff of the Soyuz rocket.
I feel the liftoff. The clock has started.
50 years ago, on May 24, 1962, Mercury astronaut Scott Carpenter launched from Cape Canaveral aboard the Aurora 7 spacecraft. The flight was the second manned orbital mission of the Mercury program, following John Glenn's Friendship 7 flight 3 months earlier. Like Glenn, Carpenter circled the Earth 3 times. The focus of the 5-hour mission was on science and included the first study of liquids and weightlessness and Earth photography. A targeting mishap during re-entry took the spacecraft about 250 miles off course. However, Carpenter and Aurora 7 were safely recovered after splashdown in the Atlantic Ocean.
Und damit recht herzlich willkommen bei Nano. Jetzt wird sich zeigen, ob die Amerikaner richtig liegen mit ihrer Entscheidung, die Raumfahrt privaten, kommerziellen Anbietern zu überlassen. Morgen soll die erste privat gebaute Rakete der Firma Spacex zur internationalen Raumstation fliegen. Noch nicht mit Astronauten, sondern erstmal mit frischer Unterwäsche, Lebensmitteln und anderen Kleinigkeiten. Nur die Russen können momentan Astronauten zur ISS befördern. Chinesen könnten es wohl auch, ihre Taikonauten waren schon im All. Aber auf diese Zusammenarbeit traut sich die NASA nicht zu setzen, noch nicht. Morgen also der Start in die privatisierte Raumfahrt.
Der Countdown läuft. Morgen Vormittag soll die Falcon 9 Rakete abheben. An Bord die unbemannte Raumkapsel Dragon. Geht alles wie in dieser Animation, bekommt in 3 Tagen die internationale Raumstation erstmals Fracht von einem privaten Paketdienst. Für die Betreiberfirma Spacex nicht nur ein gewagtes Unternehmen, sondern wie Firmenchef Elon Musk auf einer gemeinsamen Pressekonferenz mit der NASA sagte, ein Abenteuer.
Die Öffentlichkeit kann sich kaum vorstellen, dass die ISS in 90 Minuten einmal um die Erde rast. Das bedeutet eine Geschwindigkeit von 17.000 Meilen pro Stunde. Man muss starten, hinfliegen und dann auch noch für ein Rendezvous sich bis auf eine Handbreit nähern. Und das passiert bei einer Geschwindigkeit, die 12-mal schneller ist als ein Schuss aus einem Sturmgewehr.
Sollte die unbemannte Mission scheitern, will SpaceX trotzdem weitermachen. Mit der NASA wurde nach Medieninformationen ein Vertrag über 1,2 Milliarden $ für 12 Transportflüge abgeschlossen. Sie sollen unter anderem die Versorgung der ISS sicherstellen. Erstmals wird dabei ein Versorgungsschiff mit dem Greifarm der Station eingesammelt. Diesmal ist nur ein kleines Paket von 500 Kilo an Bord. Nach dem Entladen soll die Kapsel mit Müll gefüllt wieder zur Erde zurückkehren. Gelingt die Mission, ist das der erste Erfolg bei der Privatisierung der amerikanischen Raumfahrt. Parallel dazu entsteht in der Wüste von New Mexico der erste private Weltraumbahnhof. Von hier aus soll schon im nächsten Jahr ein regelmäßiger Pendelverkehr ins All aufgenommen werden. Neben Frachtmaschinen sollen mit dem Spaceship 2 Menschen in die Schwerelosigkeit gelangen. Mit der Kraft des Kapitals hoffen die privaten Weltraumunternehmen, neue Märkte zu schaffen.
Wenn uns der erste Schritt gelingt, wenn wir in der Lage sind, Tausende von Menschen mit einem hohen Sicherheitsstandard mit täglichen Flügen ins All zu schicken und damit gleichzeitig wirtschaftlich erfolgreich sind, werden wir eine rapide Entwicklung sehen. Man konnte schon oft miterleben, wie schnell sich die Dinge entwickeln, wenn staatlich kontrollierte Technologien dem Privatsektor geöffnet werden.
Pioniergeist im Weltraum und Kapitalismus? Bisher ging das nur schwer zusammen. Im 20. Jahrhundert waren Weltraumflüge Staatsangelegenheit. Das Prestige ganzer Nationen hing davon ab. 20 Jahre nach Ende des Kalten Kriegs gibt es nun offenbar einen Paradigmenwechsel. Für die Amerikaner wird es höchste Zeit. Nach dem Ende des Shuttle-Programms sollen nun Privatunternehmen die Lücke füllen. Zuletzt konnten die Amerikaner nur noch mit der russischen Soyuz ins All fliegen. Mit ihr sind unterdessen neue Besatzungsmitglieder auf der ISS eingetroffen. Nun warten hier 3 Russen, 2 Amerikaner und ein Holländer auf das SpaceX-Päckchen. Mit ihm wird ein neues Kapitel der Raumfahrt aufgeschlagen.
Look into one company's bold attempt to take over the space shuttle role. After break. Space launch is expected this weekend. Details now from Mari Ramos. She joins us from the World Weather Center. Mari.
Yes, Christy, this is really a momentous occasion. What we're looking at here is the, I guess we could say the collaboration between a startup company and a veteran company, two completely different companies coming together and having the beginning of commercial spaceflight. John Zarella tells us more.
The mission is unprecedented. It is, for many in the space business, hold your breath and cross your fingers time. After months of delays, a commercial company's spacecraft is attempting to make history. There is, says SpaceX CEO Elon Musk, both excitement and high anxiety.
We've done everything we possibly can think of to ensure the success of this mission. Despite that, there's still a significant risk.
Risk because only a handful of nations have ever done this before. And before now, no commercial company has ever attempted it. Once in orbit, the unmanned SpaceX Dragon capsule will head for a rendezvous with the International Space Station. If all is well, after a series of systems checks and maneuvers, NASA astronaut Don Pettit will use the station's robotic arm to reach out, grab hold of Dragon, and berth it to the station.
It's been a very hard technology to develop, and of course we need to prove that we've done it correctly, and I think there's a good chance that we don't quite succeed on the first time, but I'm confident we will succeed on, if it's not the first, it'll be the second or third.
There is, quite literally, a lot riding on this. With limited dollars, NASA decided to retire the shuttle, develop a new rocket to take humans on deep space missions, say to Mars, and turn over to commercial companies the job of ferrying cargo and eventually astronauts to the station. Several companies are developing vehicles for the job. SpaceX is the first ready to try.
So it can actually carry the same number of people as the space shuttle.
Last year, Musk showed off his Dragon spacecraft that successfully orbited the Earth, a precursor to the upcoming mission. Musk, the billionaire co-founder of PayPal, has no illusions when it comes to rocket science.
When I started SpaceX, it's not as though I thought rockets were easy. I mean, I did think they were very hard. But I would say it ended up being even harder than that.
Just exactly how hard will be answered very soon. John Zarella, CNN, Miami.
Among the things that the Dragon will have to do while it's in space, it's going to have to circle around the Earth a couple times. Then as it approaches the space station, it has to be able to kind of change directions. They're going to test some of the maneuver capabilities that this may have. Now, of course, all of this first has to happen is this launch. We'll see how that goes. And the weather so far appears to be cooperating. We might have a little bit of a problem with wind as we head closer to the launch time, which is expected to be tomorrow. I just checked the latest update from NASA and SpaceX on this, and they're saying that so far it's a go for launch. The rocket is now standing up nice and straight, and they're going to continue doing all of their checkpoints throughout the day today to see if they can actually do this launch tomorrow at 8:55 GMT. And a little bit of a scattered clouds, and the winds might be an issue, but so far so good, between 20 and 25 kilometers per hour. So we'll definitely be watching and see what happens tomorrow morning, Christy. Let's go ahead. Ready to go, because tomorrow is the annual, I should say, Monday morning is the annular eclipse. You still have a couple of days. So first of all, an eclipse. What's that? Well, in this case, we're talking about the moon getting in the path between the sun and the Earth. So it's going to block out the sun for a little while. But it's a little different than other solar eclipses. This is called an annular eclipse, and that's because the moon appears to be smaller than the sun. So there's literally going to be something like a ring of fire around the sun. It's not going to completely cover it. Only about 94% of the sun's surface will be covered, even though it's not necessarily a total eclipse. It's almost a total eclipse. It's called an annular eclipse, and they are quite rare. As far as the forecast across some of these areas that will have the eclipse visible. Hong Kong, for example, at sunrise, we're going to have a mix of clouds and sun, and we might get lucky and actually be able to see a little bit of this, so I'm keeping my fingers crossed for you. As we head to Tokyo, mostly cloudy skies early in the morning. This is going to be a touch and go forecast. Let's see if those clouds can clear in time. And as we head into California, we're looking at partly cloudy skies. So let's go ahead and kind of review a little bit. This area that you see here in yellow, that's the area of the partial eclipse. And then this area right here in the middle, that's the path of the annular eclipse. That means those areas that will be able to see it. 22:06 GMT in Hong Kong. So that's going to be right at sunrise for you. That's when the eclipse begin. In Tokyo, that will happen around 7:30 a.m. local time. And, you know, prime viewing spots here across parts of East Asia, Christy. Of course, the main thing is proper eye protection. And let's just hope the weather cooperates.
That's right. And if you can see it, because I'm hearing the next time you could view it from Hong Kong will be 300 years from now.
There you go.
My Ramos, thank you.
A naval rescue helicopter carried the Olympic flame from its overnight home at Coldrose in Cornwall past the cliffs and surf on its way to Land's End. And there the flame was transferred from a lantern to the Olympic torch.
There we are.
The first bearer was Ben Ainslie, the 3-times gold medal winning sailor, a man who learned to sail in Cornwall and won another title in the county only yesterday. He moved slowly through the crowd, giving lots of people a chance to reach out and touch the symbolic Olympic torch.
It was just actually pretty emotional, to be honest. I mean, there's so much effort's gone into getting this, the Olympics here in London from so many people, and it means so much. So very, very proud for everyone involved.
After just a few hundred metres, Ben Ainslie handed over to Tassie Swallow, a young local surfer. The relay had begun. The flame arrived in the UK yesterday on a plane painted gold and nicknamed the Custard Comet. The honour of lighting the Olympic flame on British soil fell to a man who helped bring the Games here and hopes to compete in them. The flame lit by the rays of the sun in Greece will now be carried around the UK by 8,000 torchbearers. As many as 9 million people say they want to see it. The flame and its 3 backups had come from Athens in specially designed lanterns, safely cradled on the front seat of British Airways Flight 2012.
Well, I'm scared to touch them right now because obviously we're mid-air and we've got the flame next to us, but it's you know, it's special. It really is. It really is you know, a proud moment for everyone.
The flame is now on its journey around the UK, through more than 1,000 towns and villages and almost every corner of the country on its way to London. Andy Moore, BBC News.
Let's go to Falmouth in Cornwall, where I believe the torch has just left. The BBC's Jane Hill is there. Jane, a very special day for Britain, but also a very special day for those taking part in this relay as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, Chris, the organisers of this enormous 70-day torch relay can be very, very happy so far with the way it's gone. Now, it's only day 1 of 70, of course, but they need to make a good impact this weekend, I think. They need this to work. This torch relay is about saying to the UK, the Olympics, the 2012 Games, are for you no matter where you live. Those who do have some criticisms of the Olympic Games point to the fact that a very high proportion of the tickets have been sold to people who live in London and the southeast of England, and that is an issue that does keep getting raised. So the next 70 days are so important because it's about sending the torch up and down the UK as a whole and saying to the nation, it's not just for people who live in London, it is for everybody, and we want everyone to feel the Olympic spirit. Certainly here today in Falmouth, in Cornwall, in the southwest of the country, we have seen a fantastic turnout. This is a small town. It's beautiful, it's picturesque, but it's old, narrow streets, and 5,000 people squashed into the streets of Falmouth to see the torch come through just in the last few minutes. That's a brilliant turnout. And LOCOG, the organising committee for the Olympic Games, I think are going to be very happy with what we have seen here in the southwest of England so far. It's moving on through other parts of the southwest now. We'll follow it over the next few days and see if the turnout continues to be that strong, but it's looking good so far. For now, from Cornwall, back to you, Chris.
Jane Hill, thank you.
We'll do stay. Get into around the UK, and we'll talk about a dwindling atmosphere as far as the rain. Notice how the large pattern of precipitation really starts to shrink in its size. Currently in London, 15 degrees, not much of a wind, 9 kilometers per hour. Cloud cover going from broken cloud cover to partly cloudy skies. The winds, you got to get over to around Dublin, 22 kilometers per hour. But I think this is going to be a brief reprieve. We are looking at the next 48 hours to be shrouded in cloud cover again, and you can start to see the surge of moisture again as it moves in from the west. But again, 2 areas of low pressure we're really watching here. The one that'll be moving into Turkey, this one really is picking up some moisture and really wrapping it around, and to the northwestern quadrant, there's been some pretty good rainfall getting picked up, that moisture from the Black Sea into areas of Romania and Bulgaria. But some needed rainfall really will be moving into our areas of northern Italy. The heavier rainfall right now making its way up, that surge of moisture. This is the brief reprieve I'm talking about for parts of London. As you can start to see, the moisture will lift and kind of cross over a little bit. What we're looking at is a nice couple of days as far as temperatures go. In between these two systems, we're going to have a surge of warmth, and this is where temperatures are getting above average. Already at current temperatures, we're going to see here on the temperature trend, notice the colors of orange really start to lift northward. In fact, you're talking, Alex talked about the sunshine that they had in Munich. I mean, currently it's 21. The average high in Munich is 18 degrees. We're looking at a high temperature of about 23 degrees. That's 5 degrees warmer than average. And of course, for the match, of course, very important temperatures. So we're going to be watching them drop somewhat. Maybe on the pitch about 20 degrees for the start of the game, but for the most part, this is going to be with clear skies. So as he mentioned, Alex said there was a lot of sunshine, but yes, it is warm. Here is the forecast highs. Warsaw, you're going to see 20, 22 in Kiev, Moscow 20. So there's that surge of warmth, but at least they're breaking up the cloud cover. Do want to end with this, Natalie, quickly for you. They had the turnover ceremony of the Olympic flame in Athens on a very damp day. Things looking good, though, ever since that shower activity. And, of course, the British delegation taking it back over into England, and I believe it was David Beckham who brought it off the plane.
Well, and now we're going to take it up from there and tell you who got to carry it next. So thank you, Tom. You could say some people, as Tom mentioned, are really carrying a torch for Britain. The Olympic flame, as he mentioned, has started its 70-day journey around the UK, always an exciting part of the run-up to the Olympics. And here it is again. Earlier today, 3-time Olympic gold medalist Ben Ainslie was the first to carry the torch on British soil. The sacred flame will change hands, get this, more than 100 times today alone. The relay is part of the run-up to the London 2012 Games in July, and everybody that gets to carry the torch always talks about what a fabulous emotional experience it is. So a lot of people getting ready to experience the thrill of taking part. Thank you for joining us on CNN's World Report. I'm Natalie Allen. I'll be right back with your top stories.
And Gwen, we'd like to start by asking you what it's been like to work with NASA, given that this is an entirely new way of doing business for the agency, and in what ways maybe has NASA been able to help?
Yeah, the relationship has been extraordinary, George. We started this adventure in August of 2006, and NASA has been extraordinarily helpful as well as supportive. Some of the specifics, we've had a number of the centers help us with our aerodynamics work, some testing as well. They helped us develop the PICA, the material, phenolic impregnated carbon ablator material that we have for our heat shield. They've been helpful in many of the other development areas on the Dragon spacecraft itself.
Okay, we're looking now at some video of what's been going on to get the Falcon 9 and the Dragon ready for launch. So if you could kind of talk us through the video and tell us what it is we're seeing.
So what you're seeing right here is the first stage approaching the hangar at our launch facility, Launch Complex 40. That arrived from our Texas test site where it was proof tested. Prior to being in Texas, it was obviously produced in our Los Angeles facility. And there you see it. And here is the Dragon arriving. Coming into the hangar in the clean room there. That's it there in the silver box. Pulling off the container that protects it during the ride. We double shrink wrap it, make sure it stays dry. So we're obviously moving it from its transport fixture onto its processing plate in the hangar. So this is in a separate part of the hangar from the Falcon 9 that's suited for to handle hypergalls. Because Dragon, the fuels are NTO and MMH. So it has a special handling area. And then you see the fixturing there on the right. Dragon's going to be lifted up and over that onto what we call the trunk. So the capsule itself is pressurized. That berths with the station and the hatch opens. And then the supplies that go into the space station are pulled from inside the capsule. The trunk is unpressurized, has a view to space. See, we're lowering Dragon down on the trunk right now. See, the trunk is that white structure below Dragon. There you see it. So unpressurized cargo would go in there, something on a what's called a FRAM, a NASA-developed flight releasable attach mechanism. There is no external cargo on this flight, just pressurized cargo. There we go. You're taking a look at the second stage on your left and the inner stage right in the middle. And there's Dragon. So we'll lift you see we're lifting the structure there, and then it will rotate to horizontal and then be mated to the second stage. You see they're lining it up there. It's got to be precise. This operation takes almost a whole day.
So keep you count to 220. All right, let's do another 10, 20.
So this rollout is for our wet dress rehearsal and static fire this past April. As you can see, we roll out in the horizontal position. We do not process our vehicle vertical. So slowly we move towards the pad, and then as we rotate to vertical, the fluid lines get engaged automatically, and then there are some hand connections as well. So that structure that you see the vehicle on, we call that the erector. And then the launch base itself is that large gray structure on the back end. See those giant towers? They're actually much taller than the vehicle itself. Those are lightning towers of critical importance here at Cape Canaveral.
Dragon's auto idle. Dragon can start up.
This operation that we're looking at right here is for a static fire, which is the final, there we go, the final systems test in prep for launch. Very much like a pilot runs its engines to test how things are operating. We want to run that final test before we launch.
Well, Gwen, after we launched today, where will you watch the rendezvous and berthing operations from?
I'll be at our headquarters in Hawthorne for that.
In Hawthorne. So
yes.
As soon as we launch, then you're headed to the West Coast.
That's correct.
And so then again, that's where you'll watch the splashdown from.
That is correct.
Well, again, thank you very much. It's I know we're looking forward to especially the first hour and a half after launch today. There'll be a lot of important things happening with the Dragon that will let us know we're clearly on the way to the rendezvous with the station. Thank you very much for coming by.
Thanks for having me, George.
And we're at T-minus 48 minutes and counting. This is Falcon Launch Control. 3, 2, 1, 0. And liftoff. We've had a cutoff.
It was to be the dawn of a new era in space travel, but SpaceX, the rocket fails to launch. X Corporation were up early at Cape Canaveral today, hoping to launch a rocket with the payload for the International Space Station. But just as the countdown hit 0, a computer shut down the sequence and the rocket stayed on the pad. Listen.
We've had a cutoff. Liftoff did not occur.
So as soon as George Diller said and liftoff, nothing happened. The launch was to be a first, as we mentioned, the first time a private company had sent a spaceship to the International Space Station. With us now with more from Miami, correspondent John Zarella, who has probably been listening to the news conference where they're trying to explain what happened. Certainly a step back, but they'll be pushing forward after this. What have you learned, John?
Oh, yeah, no question about it. You know, it was literally 0.5 seconds before liftoff that the computer, the flight computer, shut the system down. And, you know, you could hear in George Diller's voice there when he says liftoff, there's that question in his voice that, well, maybe not. As that computer shut the system down. And what we're hearing is that there was, in one of the 9 main engines on that vehicle on the first stage, that engine number 5 had what they call an overpressure reading, which could mean it wasn't getting enough fuel into the chamber. A lot of different things. They'll have technicians out at the launch pad later today to try and figure out exactly what the issue is. And clearly, in some circles, this is going to be perceived as a problem, a failure by a commercial company. But the president of the company, Gwen Shotwell, at a news conference just moments ago said it shouldn't be looked at that way.
Yeah, this is not a failure. We aborted with purpose. It would be a failure if we were to have lifted off with an engine trending in this direction.
And again, what you end up having is, if you have an engine that they need all 9 engines at liftoff, they could get to orbit and perhaps complete the mission to the space station if they would lose that engine somewhere downstream, as they say, after liftoff. But at that moment of ignition, all 9 engines have to be performing precisely in order to go ahead and achieve the orbit that they need to rendezvous with the space station. As you pointed out, this would be a first. This is an unmanned vehicle, but no commercial company in the history of spaceflight has ever successfully orbited a spacecraft and rendezvoused and ultimately berthed or docked with the International Space Station. That's what they were attempting to do. Natalie?
And so a lot is riding on this. NASA needs these private companies to help them out with the International Space Station so they can pursue either even loftier space exploration, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. The bottom line was that NASA, with its $18.5 billion annual budget, did not have enough money to continue flying space shuttles, servicing the space station, bringing crews there, and to build a new rocket that could take humans perhaps to Mars in 25, 30 years. So NASA decided to go ahead and allow commercial companies, SpaceX just happens to be the first one ready to do it, allow the commercial companies to take over flying into low Earth orbit. So there is a lot riding on this, a validation of NASA's philosophy, of the direction that NASA was going in. So it is critical that these commercial companies get up and flying, because right now the U.S. has no capability to put astronauts into space, and they are relying on the Russians to take the astronauts back and forth to and from the space station, and cargo as well. Natalie?
All right, John Zarella, our space correspondent,
Sure.
always on top of things for us. We appreciate it, John. Thanks.
My pleasure.
And commercial spacecraft to the International Space Station did not get off the ground today. The rocket launch was aborted less than a second before liftoff because a computer detected pressure building up in one of the rocket engines.
And liftoff. We've had a cutoff.
Well, that's how it didn't go. The first commercial rocket launch to the International Space Station never did get off the ground earlier today. The launch aborted less than 1 second before liftoff because a computer detected a problem with one of the engines. What went wrong? Let's find out. John Zarella joins us now from CNN Miami. John.
Hey, Jim, you know, the history is put on hold, at least for a few days now, while SpaceX officials try to figure out what exactly went wrong. As you mentioned, the company was attempting to become the first commercial company to ever send a vehicle, their Dragon capsule, which sits on top of the Falcon 9 rocket, send that capsule for a rendezvous and berthing with the International Space Station. Only a handful of nations in the world have the capability to do this. SpaceX trying to become the first commercial company. But half a second before liftoff, the computers shut the entire system down. Turned out they had a problem with one of the 9 main engines on that Falcon rocket. The president of, at a news conference, the president of the company of SpaceX said, you know what, we're disappointed, but
this is not a failure. We aborted with purpose. It would be a failure if we were to have lifted off with an engine trending in this direction.
they need all 9 of their main engines firing properly in order to get into the right orbit in order to chase down and make that rendezvous with the space station. So a failure at liftoff of any one of those nine engines would have created a problem. You know, Jim, this is huge. Can't be understated because NASA decided it was going to go ahead and retire the space shuttle fleet, turn over to commercial companies flying of crews and cargo to the International Space Station. SpaceX, the first of many companies ready to fill that void. So it's critical that they get off the ground and do this because right now the United States has no way to bring astronauts to the space station, relying solely on the Russians to fly our astronauts to the space station. Jim?
Yeah, very briefly, I mean, you know, North Korea said we didn't fail either. SpaceX executives have a point. It's still on the launch pad. How soon do they think they can get it back up?
Within a couple of days, depending on what they find at the launch pad. If it's a serious problem with that engine, it might take longer. If it's something that's a quick fix, the 22nd is their next target date.
All right, John Zarella, watching it all from CNN Miami. John, it is a fascinating story. Thanks.
Yes.
Now, SpaceX, of course, had trouble lighting the rocket, but there were no problems with the Olympic flame at the start of the journey across the UK on Saturday. 3-time Olympic gold medalist Ben Ainslie had the honor of being the first torchbearer. He's the first of some 8,000 people who are going to be carrying it through more than 1,000 communities in the UK and Ireland.
The ignition sequence had started, but there was a cutoff.
The scheduled May 19th launch of the SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket and Dragon spacecraft on the first commercial venture to the International Space Station was aborted with T-minus 0.5 seconds left in the countdown.
Engine controller noted high chamber pressure in engine 5. Software did what it was supposed to do, aborted engine 5. Then we went through the remaining engine shutdown. We will go in and try another day on the 22nd. We're looking at a backup day on the 23rd as well.
The 23rd looks like it's a good date from the trajectory, and the station crew says they're ready to support.
The SpaceX demonstration flight to the ISS calls for an extensive set of tests requiring the Dragon spacecraft to show that it can move precisely in orbit and approach the space station carefully. Only after these tests are successful will the spacecraft be allowed to approach the orbiting laboratory close enough to be grappled and berthed by the station's robotic arm.
Der erste private Raumtransporter Dragon konnte nicht wie geplant in Richtung ISS starten. Offenbar war der Druck in einem der Triebwerke zu hoch. Die unbemannte Kapsel sollte 500 Kilo Ladung, vor allem Lebensmittel, zur internationalen Raumstation bringen und auf dem Heimweg Abfälle mit zur Erde nehmen. Die NASA will den Raumtransporter künftig für Flüge zur ISS mieten.
Im Nordosten Italiens sind bei einem schweren Erdbeben mindestens 4 Menschen ums Leben gekommen. 2 weitere, darunter auch eine Deutsche, sollen an Herzversagen gestorben sein. In der Nähe von Bologna stürzten mehrere Fabrikhallen und historische Gebäude ein. Seismologen sprechen vom schlimmsten Beben in der Region seit 3 Jahren. Emra Elden und Michael Kadereit berichten.
Um 4:04 Uhr, als die Erde im Norden Italiens zu beben beginnt, liegen die meisten Menschen noch im Bett. Viele springen panisch auf und retten sich im Schlafanzug auf die Straße. Italienische Medien berichten von Tausenden Obdachlosen. Es hat alles so stark gewackelt, wir konnten uns kaum auf den Beinen halten, die Möbel sind einfach umgestürzt. Ich weiß nicht, was wir jetzt tun sollen. In unsere Häuser können wir nicht mehr zurück. Am schlimmsten trifft es die benachbarten Orte San Felice und Finale Emilia, etwa 35 Kilometer nordwestlich von Bologna. Hier in 10 Kilometer Tiefe befindet sich auch das Epizentrum. Bei dem Beben werden mehrere Fabriken zerstört, 4 Arbeiter kommen dabei ums Leben. 2 Frauen, darunter eine 37-jährige Deutsche, sterben an Herzversagen.
Hier in San Felice, im Epizentrum des Bebens, sind viele ältere Gebäude eingestürzt, wie dieses hier. Das Stadtzentrum ist abgesperrt. Viele Menschen haben Angst, wieder in ihre Häuser zurückzukehren, vor allem, weil es ständig starke Nachbeben gibt. Etwa 200 Evakuierte werden allein in diesem Ort die Nacht in Schulen und Zelten verbringen müssen.
Italien wird immer wieder von starken Erdstößen erschüttert, wie 2009 in L'Aquila mit 300 Toten. Das Land liegt direkt auf der afrikanischen Platte und drückt gegen die eurasische.
Italien bewegt sich pro Jahr etwa 3 bis 4 Zentimeter nach Nordosten, drückt gegen den europäischen Kontinent, schiebt sich unter die Alpen, faltet dabei die Alpen auf, bricht das Gestein und es kommt zu einem Erdbeben.
Der Präsident der Provinz Modena forderte die Regierung in Italien zum Handeln auf. In den nächsten Tagen soll es in dem Gebiet stark regnen. Morgen bleiben auch die Schulen vorerst geschlossen.
Trümmer in Italien. Bei einem schweren Erdbeben sterben mindestens 7 Menschen. Dramatische Nacht war es in Italien. Ein schweres Erdbeben hat die Region Emilia-Romagna erschüttert. Mindestens 7 Menschen starben, darunter offenbar auch eine Deutsche. Etliche historisch bedeutende Gebäude wurden beschädigt. Der heftigste Erdstoß mit der Stärke 6,0 war im gesamten Norden des Landes zu spüren. Das Epizentrum lag im Großraum Bologna. Besonders schwer hat es die Stadt Finale Emilia getroffen. Antje Pieper berichtet.
Die Wucht des Erdstoßes brachte auch eine Kirche zum Einsturz. Um 4:04 Uhr, mitten in der Nacht, bebte es. Historische Bauwerke, Wohnhäuser, Autos wurden zerstört. Tausende liefen in Panik vor die Tür. Es ist eine Katastrophe. Ich habe noch nie sowas gesehen. Ich habe noch den Lärm in den Ohren. Schrecklich. Mein Bett wurde gegen den Schrank geworfen. Man konnte noch nicht einmal aufstehen. So stark war der Erdstoß. Fürchterlich. 4 Arbeiter starben in Fabriken. Sie wurden während der Nachtschicht erschlagen durch einstürzende Dächer und Pfeiler. Die Angehörigen fassungslos. Ich habe versucht, meinen Sohn anzurufen, aber er hat nicht geantwortet. Wir sind sofort hierher geeilt. Um 6:35 Uhr haben sie dann gesagt, Nicola ist tot. Am Nachmittag dann ein starkes Nachbeben, das bis nach Bologna und Mailand zu spüren war. Rund um Ferrara stürzten weitere Wohnhäuser ein. Ein Feuerwehrmann wurde bei den Rettungsarbeiten verletzt. Mehr als 3000 Menschen mussten aus Sicherheitsgründen ihr Haus verlassen. Der Schaden an den Kulturgütern ist noch gar nicht abzusehen.
Die Gemeindeverwaltung von San Agostino ist nur noch eine Ruine. Der kleine Ort in der Emilia-Romagna ist am stärksten von dem Erdbeben betroffen. Es war Sonntag früh kurz nach 4 Uhr, als ein Erdstoß der Stärke 6,0 die Region erschütterte. In San Agostino kam eine alte Frau ums Leben. Viele Einwohner haben Zuflucht in dieser Turnhalle gefunden, können nicht in ihre beschädigten Häuser zurück oder haben Angst vor einem Nachbeben. Es war wahnsinnig laut. Ich habe sofort meine Tochter geschnappt. Wir sind zwar hingefallen, aber dann sind wir sofort raus aus dem Haus. Es war schrecklich. Ich bin in Ohnmacht gefallen und dann hat man mich ins Krankenhaus gebracht. Grauenhaft, furchtbar. 20 Sekunden lang hat mein Haus wie ein Karussell gewackelt. Seine Frau hat schreckliche Angst, nach Hause zu gehen. Also bleibt er mit ihr und der Tochter in der Turnhalle. Wie lange, wissen sie noch nicht. Auch einen Ort weiter ist der Zivilschutz damit beschäftigt, Notbetten aufzubauen. Im gesamten Erdbebengebiet sind etwa 3000 Menschen evakuiert worden. 6 kamen ums Leben, darunter eine 37-jährige Deutsche, die vermutlich nach dem Beben einem Herzinfarkt erlag. Rund 50 Nachbeben haben die Region bisher erschüttert und es ist nicht ausgeschlossen, dass weitere Erdstöße folgen.
Norditalienische Region Emilia-Romagna erschüttert. Die Zahl der Todesopfer nach dem stärksten Beben am Morgen zu Sonntag ist inzwischen auf 7 gestiegen. Unter den Toten auch eine 37-jährige Deutsche. Mindestens 50 Menschen wurden verletzt. Tausende können nicht zurück in ihre Häuser und Wohnungen.
Die schwersten Erdstöße erreichten in der Nacht eine Stärke von 3,7. In Finale Emilia in der Region Modena befand sich das Epizentrum. Hilfsorganisationen haben im Fußballstadion Notunterkünfte aufgebaut. Bei Kälte und strömendem Regen verließen viele verängstigte Einwohner ihre Wohnungen und suchten dort Schutz. Der Tag war tragisch für alle Einwohner in Finale Emilia. Hier mussten besonders viele zu Verwandten oder weiter wegfahren. Wir hatten viele Nachbeben. Die Nacht schlafen viele im Auto, weil die Erde so oft weiter bebt. Nach ersten Schätzungen wurden mindestens 3000 Menschen in den Provinzen Modena und Ferrara obdachlos. Unser Haus steht noch, aber drinnen ist alles völlig kaputt. Alles liegt auf dem Boden. Ich war noch nicht wieder dort, um nachzusehen, weil wir sofort raus sind. Meine Frau und ich sind sofort auf die Straße gerannt, als wir das Beben hörten. Wegen der Schäden bleiben zahlreiche Schulen geschlossen. Auch Straßen sind unpassierbar. In Modena wurde ein Krankenhaus geräumt. Patienten und Pflegebedürftige fanden in weiteren Zeltstädten vorübergehend eine Bleibe. Sie können nicht nach Hause, weil sie im historischen Zentrum leben, wo alles abgesperrt ist. Wie lange die Menschen im Ausnahmezustand ausharren müssen, weiß zur Stunde niemand. Noch immer herrscht große Angst vor neuen Erdbeben.
Mit Schlagstöcken und Fäusten wehren die Polizisten die Angriffe aus dem schwarzen Block ab. Lange war es friedlich gewesen auf der Anti-NATO-Demo in Chicago. Doch dann kommt es doch noch zu den befürchteten Zusammenstößen mit der Polizei. Die vereitelt zur gleichen Zeit offenbar noch mehrere Brandanschläge. Auch ein Wahlkampfbüro von US-Präsident Obama sollte wohl in Flammen aufgehen. Drinnen gibt sich der NATO-Gipfel davon ungerührt. Hier werden Erfolge vermeldet. Der Raketenschild in Europa ist teilweise einsatzbereit nach nur 2 Jahren. In Lissabon waren wir uns einig, ein NATO-Raketenabwehrsystem zu schaffen. Heute in Chicago können wir erklären, es ist Realität. Bis 2020 soll die Raketenabwehr fertig sein. Mithilfe von Radaranlagen und Abwehrraketen sollen feindliche Raketen aus sogenannten Schurkenstaaten bereits im Anflug zerstört werden. Russlands Bedenken teilt die NATO nicht. Weiteres Gipfelthema Afghanistan. Frankreichs Präsident Hollande zieht seine rund 3300 Soldaten 2 Jahre früher ab als vereinbart. Glücklich ist die Bundeskanzlerin über den Alleingang des Nachbarn nicht.
Wir sind gemeinsam nach Afghanistan gegangen und wir wollen auch gemeinsam aus Afghanistan wieder abziehen.
Wohl nur beim gemeinsamen Gruppenbild ließen sich Bundeskanzlerin Merkel und Frankreichs Präsident Hollande von ihren Meinungsverschiedenheiten nichts anmerken.
Aber mit der Gipfelruhe war es am Wochenende nicht so weit her. Erst das G8-Treffen in Blockhütten beim amerikanischen Präsidenten als Gastgeber und dann noch das NATO-Treffen. 2 Störfaktoren, ein griechischer und ein französischer, wollten das Bild nicht so schön machen, wie es sich Barack Obama gewünscht hatte, denn der braucht für seinen Wahlkampf Bilder mit, sagen wir, goldenem Rahmen. Bei beiden Gipfeln ging es letztlich ums Geld. Das kann man schon einmal festhalten. Nun, in Zeiten klammer Kassen gibt sich die NATO ein neues Geschäftsmodell. Mit weniger Geld mehr erreichen. Smart Defense heißt das Zauberwort. Große Rüstungsprojekte werden zum Beispiel gemeinsam gekauft. Und dazu gehört auch die Raketenabwehr, deren erste Stufe nun einsatzfähig erklärt wurde. Weiteres Gipfelthema in Chicago, Afghanistan und der Abzug der NATO-Bündnistruppen.
Ein bisschen Pomp muss sein, gerade bei diesem Gipfel. Das Bündnis steht Seit an Seit. Das soll die Botschaft sein, die aus Obamas Heimatstadt rund um die Welt geht. Im Wahljahr will der Präsident als außenpolitischer Macher glänzen. Doch das kann er nur, wenn es ihm gelingt, die Bündnispartner auf eine gemeinsame Linie beim Thema Afghanistan einzuschwören. Wir sind uns alle einig, dass wir diese Mission beenden wollen. Das wird ein weiterer Beleg dafür sein, dass die NATO tatsächlich das Zentrum eines Sicherheitsnetzwerkes ist und dass es nichts Vergleichbares gibt auf der Welt. Doch der Neuling auf dem Gipfel könnte zum Spielverderber werden. François Hollande will seine Soldaten schon bis Ende des Jahres nach Hause holen und nicht erst Ende 2014, wie es vereinbart war. Ich habe die Verhandlungspartner hier daran erinnern müssen, dass ich das den Franzosen versprochen habe. Präsident Obama habe ich ganz klar gesagt, dieser Punkt ist nicht verhandelbar, denn er betrifft die Souveränität Frankreichs. Sonst sind es oft die Deutschen, von denen sich Amerika mehr Unterstützung wünscht im Bündnis. Aber Angela Merkel sichert nicht nur Hilfe für nach 2014 zu, so wie es Obama gewünscht hatte. Der Außenminister macht offen Druck auf Frankreich.
Ein Abzugswettlauf der westlichen Demokratien aus innenpolitischen Gründen, das würde die Terrorismusbekämpfung nicht stärken, sondern schwächen. Und deswegen sollten alle Beteiligten klug genug sein, bei dem zu bleiben, was gemeinsam abgesprochen und abgestimmt worden ist.
Hinter den Kulissen wird jetzt an einer Erklärung gefeilt, mit der alle ihr Gesicht wahren können. Doch in Chicago geht niemand davon aus, dass Hollande so kurz vor den Parlamentswahlen in Frankreich sein Wahlversprechen bricht.
Hat da doch der Herr Hollande der Kanzlerin das Händchen gehalten. Ja, was das bedeutet, werden wir in nächster Zeit noch erleben. Jetzt schauen wir einmal auf den NATO-Generalsekretär Rasmussen. Denn der hat anscheinend schon die französische Position mit eingebaut in das, was er vorhat mit der NATO und das, was jetzt durch den Gipfel abgesegnet werden muss. Schauen wir auf seine Pressekonferenz.
Die vorrangige Verantwortung der NATO ist es, für die Sicherheit unserer Menschen und unserer Nationen zu sorgen und sie vor Gefahren zu schützen. Das haben wir jetzt seit über 60 Jahren getan und haben gelernt, unsere Lektionen gelernt und sind nun bereit, die nächsten Herausforderungen gemeinsam anzunehmen. Auf dem letzten Gipfel in Lissabon vor 18 Monaten haben wir eine ehrgeizige Agenda verkündet und heute in Chicago liefern wir die ersten Ergebnisse. In Lissabon haben wir vereinbart, ein Raketenabwehrsystem der NATO zu etablieren. Heute in Chicago haben wir erklärt, dass dies eine Realität bereits ist. Das nennen wir eine Interimfähigkeit. Und dies ist der erste Schritt hin zu unserem langfristigen Ziel einer vollen Abdeckung, eines vollen Schutzes für die Menschen, die Staatsgebiete und Streitkräfte im europäischen NATO-Gebiet zu gewährleisten. Unser System wird Raketenabwehrsysteme verschiedener Verbündeter miteinander verbinden und verknüpfen, Satelliten, Schiffe, Radarstationen und Abfangraketen und das Ganze unter der NATO-Kontrolle und dem NATO-Kommando. So werden wir uns gegen Bedrohungen von außerhalb des europäisch-atlantischen Gebiets verteidigen können. Dies ist echte transatlantische Teamarbeit. Die USA und die europäischen Verbündeten investieren gemeinsam in unsere gemeinsame Sicherheit. Und das ist ein hervorragendes Beispiel für die neue Kultur der Zusammenarbeit, die wir Smart Defense nennen, intelligente Verteidigung. Die Länder arbeiten zusammen, um gemeinsam Fähigkeiten und Ressourcen zu entwickeln, die sie alleine nicht entwickeln können. Wir haben bereits ein paar gute Beispiele dafür. Zum Beispiel in den Balkanländern ist es so, dass die NATO-Verbündeten sich abwechseln bei den Patrouillenflügen zur Kontrolle des Luftraums. Das bedeutet, dass unsere baltischen Verbündeten sich auf ihre Ressourcen in anderen wichtigen Bereichen konzentrieren können, zum Beispiel Streitkräfte für Afghanistan zur Verfügung zu stellen. Deswegen haben wir vereinbart, dass die NATO weiterhin die Luftraumüberwachung für die baltischen Staaten gewährleisten wird. Wir haben außerdem vereinbart, unsere Fähigkeiten zur Bodenüberwachung zu verbessern. Während unserer Maßnahmen und Einsätze zum Schutz des Volkes von Libyen haben wir erfahren, wie wichtig es ist, die bestmöglichen Nachrichtendienste, Überwachungskapazitäten und Aufklärungskapazitäten zu haben. Uns ist also klar geworden, dass wir da unsere Kapazitäten ausbauen müssen. Und diese Lücke wird nun gefüllt. Heute wurde ein Vertrag unterzeichnet über den Kauf 5 zusätzlicher unbewaffneter Drohnen, mit denen unsere Kommandeure in der Lage sein werden, Drohungen identifizieren zu können, Ziele identifizieren zu können und erkennen zu können, jederzeit erkennen zu können, was hinter dem Horizont passiert. Intelligente Verteidigung ist ein entscheidendes Prinzip der NATO. Wir haben vereinbart, daraus die neue Geschäftsgrundlage der NATO zu machen. Und das wird bereits in die Praxis umgesetzt. Heute haben wir ein robustes Paket beschlossen mit über 20 multinationalen Projekten, um die Kapazitäten zu sichern, die wir brauchen, und zwar zu einem Preis, den wir uns leisten können. Zum Beispiel haben wir in Afghanistan gelernt, wie wichtig es ist, unsere Streitkräfte gegen Bombenangriffe zu verteidigen, gegen Bombenfallen auf den Straßen. Eine Anzahl von Verbündeten wird jetzt nun Ressourcen zusammenlegen, um gemeinsam ferngesteuerte Roboter zu bezahlen, die solche Bombenfallen räumen, um unsere Streitkräfte und Zivilisten zu schützen. Und aus unseren Operationen in Libyen und am Horn von Afrika haben wir außerdem gelernt, wie wichtig es ist, die Seeüberwachung zu verbessern. Eine Gruppe von Verbündeten hat also vereinbart, ihre Seeüberwachungsflugzeuge zusammenzulegen, um mehr Patrouillenflüge effizienter durchführen zu können mit vereinten Ressourcen. Morgen werden über 60 Führungspersönlichkeiten der Welt sich konzentrieren auf die Zukunft von Afghanistan. Diese Sitzung wird ein starkes Signal unseres Engagements an das afghanische Volk senden. Wir haben wichtige Schritte unternommen hin zu einem sicheren und stabilen Afghanistan. Wie mit Präsident Karzai in Lissabon vereinbart, ist unser gemeinsames Ziel, dass die afghanischen Streitkräfte die volle Verantwortung für die Sicherheit ihres Landes Ende 2014 übernehmen. Und wir sind genau auf der Spur. Die afghanischen Streitkräfte sind bereits in der Führungsrolle für die Sicherheitsgewährleistung für die Hälfte der Bevölkerung, und bald werden sie über 75% der Bevölkerung schützen. Bis Mitte 2013 erwarten wir, dass die afghanischen Streitkräfte die Führungsrolle für die Sicherheit im ganzen Land übernehmen können. Und in dem Maße, wie sie Verantwortung übernehmen, können wir unseren Fokus verrücken von Kampfeinsätzen zur Unterstützung. Aber wir bleiben einsatzbereit für Kampfeinsätze. Sobald die Afghanen die volle Verantwortung übernommen haben werden, Ende 2014 wird unser Kampfeinsatz zum Ende kommen. Aber wir werden nicht einfach das Land verlassen. Sobald der Übergang geschaffen ist, wird die NATO eine neue Mission zu erledigen haben, nämlich Ausbildung und Unterstützung der afghanischen Sicherheitskräfte. Morgen freue ich mich auf eine grundlegende Diskussion mit der ISAF und den anderen Partnern, um diesen Weg zu definieren.
This is Mission Control, Houston. The Expedition 31 crew members on board the International Space Station worked a replanned day on Monday due to the delay in the start of the first commercial cargo vehicles mission. The Dragon spacecraft's planned launch last Saturday was aborted due to high pressure readings in one of its 9 engines. A faulty valve has been replaced, and launch is now set for Tuesday morning. That means Dragon's fly-under of the station is now anticipated on Thursday morning, and the grapple and berthing of the vehicle to the station's Harmony node pushes out to Friday morning. On Monday, Station Commander Oleg Kononenko spent time with 2 of his new crewmates, flight engineers Gennady Podolka and Sergei Revin, in scheduled handover activities. That's a routine thing for newly arrived crew members to get up to speed on the current status and the layout of the International Space Station. Podolka, Revin, and Joe Acaba all came aboard the station last Thursday morning and plan to be there until September. Podolka and Revin also spent a portion of their day on Monday continuing to unload the Soyuz spacecraft, unloading Russian items that they brought to the station with them. Flight engineer Joe Acaba had crew orientation time on his schedule on Monday as well. He also set up the hardware for the ambulatory monitoring component of the integrated cardiovascular experiment. That's an experiment that is looking to quantify the amount of cardiac atrophy that's experienced by people during an extended spaceflight. He and other crew members have participated in this experiment and will continue that throughout his time on orbit. Flight engineer Andre Kalpers has also participated in the ICV experiment during his time on orbit. Today, Kalpers worked on maintenance, exchanging lamps in the fluid physics experiment facility, as well as checking on the upstream resistance of the power connectors on the image processing unit. Acaba spent time today working with flight engineer Don Pettit, unpacking American items that were delivered on the Soyuz spacecraft that arrived last week. And Pettit also spent a good portion of his day modifying an Ethernet cable for the muscle atrophy resistive exercise system. Schedule for the crew members on Tuesday will include additional transfers from the Soyuz vehicle and more orientation for the 3 new crew members as the Expedition 31 crew awaits for news on the launch of the first commercial cargo ship.
Seinen Bann zieht die Sonnenfinsternis. Besonders rar eine sogenannte ringförmige Sonnenfinsternis, wie sie heute über Asien und über dem Westen der USA zu beobachten war. Dabei schiebt sich der Mond auf seiner Laufbahn so vor die Sonne, dass von der Erde aus nur noch ein Feuerring zu sehen ist. Und der war dieses Mal besonders gut in Japan zu sehen. Wie hier in der Bucht von Tokio verfolgten Millionen von Menschen, wie sich der Mond vor die Sonne schob, bis nur noch ein Strahlenkranz zu erkennen war. Die Sonnenfinsternis war zuerst in Südostasien zu sehen und dann mehrere Stunden später im Westen der USA.
Asien und den USA durften eine spektakuläre Sonnenfinsternis genießen, als sich der Mond vor die Sonne schob. Das Naturphänomen war zuerst in Teilen Chinas zu sehen, anschließend blickten die Menschen in Taiwan, Japan und in verschiedenen US-Bundesstaaten Richtung Himmel.
Of this annular solar eclipse, it was watched by billions. And if you missed it, stick around. The full view is just ahead. Welcome back. Now, there is rainy weather for earthquake survivors in Italy. Let's get the very latest now with Mara Ramos. She joins us from the World Weather Center. Mari.
Christy, this earthquake that struck Italy over the weekend caused some serious damage across portions of North Italy, particularly just south of Bologna in the Emilia-Romagna region. Now, I want to show you a couple of the pictures that we have from that area. Here you see in Ferrara an older couple with umbrellas standing outside in the aftermath of this quake. Now, what's happening is people in many cases are scared to go back into their homes. We've heard from our reporters in the region that many people are sleeping outside or sleeping inside their cars and just spending as much time outdoors as possible, but the temperatures have been relatively chilly, it's been cloudy, and it has been raining. One of the hardest hit areas is this town of Finale Emilia there in northern Italy, and what you're looking at here is rescue personnel and civil authorities building a tent city for survivors. There's thousands of people that may need this now because of damage to their homes, cracks in the walls, and just because they're scared to be in these concrete structures until they're actually checked. But it has been rain, and a reporter there earlier was saying that they're building these tent cities inside a football stadium, and that there was water this high, several centimeters high, where they're building these tents. So it is a problem for people in this area. You can see that circulation in the clouds. They're still across central parts of Italy here with that big area of low pressure. When you have a lot of moisture, any amount of rain that falls here will be a problem, but we think the heaviest rain will now be across the pre-alpine region and then over toward the Alps. So I think we're going to be in a little bit better shape coming up in the next few days across this region. That big swath of rain has moved on, but that area of low pressure that's still lingering here in the Gulf of Genoa will bring you windy weather, cooler weather, and still the possibility of rain. Christy, this next story might be one of my favorite stories so far this entire year, and it's the story of the annular solar eclipse. The pictures were mesmerizing, and Rami Inocencio was right there in the crowd in Hong Kong Harbor. Let's take a listen.
It was always touch and go whether Hong Kong would see it or not.
But this lucky camera captured Monday's solar eclipse before it slid from view. Others in Hong Kong weren't so lucky. This morning, thousands of people gathered here on the Hong Kong harborfront to witness a rare astronomical event. That was, of course, the annular solar eclipse. But unfortunately, as you can see behind me, the clouds obscured their view and it dashed their hopes. Luckily, some other people elsewhere in the world did get to see some pretty beautiful images. Early risers in parts of southern China were treated to this blazing sight. Totality, the time of maximum darkness, started just after sunrise local time and lasted just over 3 minutes. Here in Hong Kong, some 5,000 sun gazers at a viewing party missed totality, but there was a brief break in the clouds. Oh, there it is. Which did reward them with a literal 3-second burst. And then it's going away again. After Hong Kong, the eclipse dazzled viewing parties in Tokyo as it kept on its easterly path. This shot was taken from a solar-powered camera placed on top of Mount Fuji. The eclipse then ended over the western United States at sunset, having crossed over California, the Grand Canyon in New Mexico, and ending in Texas, having traversed nearly 14,000 kilometers in just over 3 hours. An annular solar eclipse is when the diameter of the moon isn't able to cover the whole entire disk of the sun. So basically what you get is a halo or a ring of fire around the moon. Unfortunately, here in Hong Kong, we weren't treated to that pretty beautiful and spectacular sight. The next time this is going to happen is going to be 300 years from now, viewable from here in Hong Kong. But if you're elsewhere in the world, particularly in Australia, you will be lucky enough to see this next year in May of 2013 and then also in April of 2014. So get ready to head on over down under. In the meantime, folks here are leaving, a little bit disappointed, but hopefully you got to see it where you are. Ramy Inocencio, CNN, Hong Kong.
Hey, you know what? I didn't get to see it where I am because it wasn't visible here in Georgia, and it was raining anyway. But I do want to show you some pictures, Christy, from different places around the world. Our iReporters have been busy. I love this picture from Joel in New Mexico in the United States. There, the weather was generally clear, and they were able to get some pretty nice images. And Ronald in the Philippines, in Palenque City, said that what a treat to wake up to this sight first thing in the morning. Solar eclipse happened in the early morning hours, of course, here in the Philippines. And this last one right here, I love it, from Derek. You see why you have that ring around there? Ramy mentioned it. Remember the super moon, Christy? Kind of the same thing, because the moon is so close, it's unable to cover the entire disk of the sun. And there you have the ring around the sun. Back to you.
Wow. Our iReporters definitely delivered a big thank you to all of them. And Mari Ramos, thank you.
Sure.
Now, politicians, they may not always seem like the common man, but in their downtime, it seems that they do like to kick back, relax, and watch the game. Now, the big game this weekend was the UEFA Champions League final between Chelsea and Bayern Munich. And the politicians in question were some of the world's most prominent. Now, if you've been living in a cave and have not heard the result, this picture should tell you all you need to know. You got British Prime Minister David Cameron. He's doing the Superman, that staple of British soccer celebrations, while Angela Merkel clearly thinks that there is nothing super about the penalty that Chelsea has just scored. The U.S. is often said to have a special relationship with Britain, and judging by President Obama's expression, it seems pretty clear where his allegiance lies. But Chelsea wasn't the only winner, so I'm happy to report diplomatic decency also won the day. And that is Newsstream. But the news continues at CNN. World Business Today is next.
Körner groß wie Golfbälle prasseln herab. Binnen Minuten liegen die Eisgeschosse 40 Zentimeter hoch. Es sieht tatsächlich aus wie im Skigebiet, doch das ist mitten im Rheinland, und zwar Ende Mai, wo das Unwetter besonders wütete. Eva de Lubomütz und Daniel Rosenkranz berichten.
Damit hatte niemand gerechnet. Um kurz vor 7 schüttet es wie aus Eimern. Die Straßen geflutet. Einige Städte in NRW im Chaos. Mechernich. Innerhalb von Minuten kommen mehr als 45 Tonnen Hagel vom Himmel. Teilweise so groß wie Golfbälle. Bernd Kindgen räumt heute die letzten Spuren beiseite. Vor 12 Stunden dachte er, die Welt geht unter.
Ich wollte erst noch mit dem Hund spazieren gehen, aber Gott sei Dank haben wir das nicht gemacht. Ich denke, das hätte im Krankenhaus geendet. Wie gesagt, ich habe 3, 4 Körner mitgekriegt am Kopf, das war sehr schmerzhaft.
Eigentlich hatten sie mit Sandalenwetter gerechnet. Dann versuchen die Mechaniker im Sommerlook den Schaden zu begrenzen. Schippen Schnee Mitte Mai. In Düsseldorf legt das Hagelchaos sogar eine Weltmeisterschaft lahm. Im Rochus Club sollen gestern eigentlich die Spitzentennisteams der Welt antreten. Das Unwetter verhagelt den Plan. Schneeschippen anstatt Bälle schlagen. Sicherheitsmann Nihat King stand auf einmal mitten in prasselnden Eisklumpen.
Wir mussten die ganzen Herrschaften, die hier rumliefen, die wussten nicht wohin, die mussten wir alle evakuieren. Und dann kam das Wasser von oben so mächtig hier runter mit den Hagel zusammen, dass die Leute hier alle ausgerutscht sind und wir sie alle hier kontrollieren mussten. Verkehr ging gar nicht mehr, dass die Autos hier alle wegrutschten. Also das war ganz schlimm, war das. Also ich habe das noch nie so mitgekriegt gehabt. Das war echt schlimm.
Heute macht die Sonne ihre Arbeit, der Hagel nur noch ein Haufen Elend. 188 Einsätze allein in Düsseldorf. Die Feuerwehren in NRW im Dauereinsatz. Auch Marc Vogel hat so heftigen Hagel selten gesehen.
Es waren schon außergewöhnliche Größen, so von Tischtennisballgröße oder Taubeneiergröße kann man sprechen. Und das auf eine Fläche von 15 bis 20 Zentimeter hoch. Also es ist schon ganz ordentlich gewesen, was da runtergekommen ist. Hat auch einen enormen Schaden teilweise angerichtet. Und ja, das war, wie gesagt, sehr ungewöhnlich.
Bei Kamp Lindfort brennt in der Nacht ein Schloss. Ursache offenbar ein Blitzschlag. Zum Glück gibt es keine Verletzten. Der Schaden 1 bis 2 Millionen Euro. Bernd Kindgen ist froh, dass das Unwetter vorbei ist. Die ganze Nacht hat er kaum geschlafen. Eins ist für den Brummifahrer sicher. Noch so einen Horrorhagel braucht er erstmal nicht.
In Italiens, bei dem am Wochenende mindestens 7 Menschen starben, zittert die Erde dort weiter. Dutzende Nachbeben wurden gezählt. Der Schaden ist noch gar nicht abschätzbar, denn nicht viele Häuser sind eingestürzt, auch unschätzbare Kulturbauwerke sind verloren. Tausende Obdachlose schlafen in Notzelten oder einfach in ihren Autos. Tobias Stamberger.
Alte Menschen, die auf Feldbetten kampieren müssen und Kinder, die in dicken Winterjacken schlafen, um sich vor der Kälte zu schützen. Sie alle sind obdachlos geflohen vor den Erdstößen, denen bereits 7 Menschen zum Opfer gefallen sind. Wir allein haben 250 Personen in Zelten unterbringen können und versorgen weitere 150 Menschen in einer anderen Notunterkunft. Ohne die vielen Freiwilligen, die rund um die Uhr mithelfen, hätten wir das wohl nicht geschafft. Und während die Helfer auf allen möglichen freien Flächen Notunterkünfte errichten, bebt die Erde in der Nacht erneut. Erst aus der Luft wird das ganze Ausmaß des Schadens deutlich. Historische Gebäude sind wie Kartenhäuser ineinander gefallen. Von diesem Bauernhof ist nicht mehr viel übrig. Auf dem Feld ein tiefer Graben. Unser Haus steht noch, aber drinnen ist alles völlig kaputt. Das Bad, einfach alles. Alles liegt auf dem Boden. Wir müssen abwarten, ob sie uns wieder nach Hause lassen. Im Moment ist es wohl sicherer, hier zu bleiben. Wegen Einsturzgefahr wurde dieses Krankenhaus evakuiert, die Patienten untergebracht in Zelten. Wie lange sie und die übrigen Flüchtlinge dort ausharren müssen, weiß niemand. Jede Art der Ablenkung ist wahrscheinlich willkommen.
Millionen Menschen starrten heute in Asien und den USA gebannt in den Himmel, denn dort sahen sie einen spektakulären Feuerring. Die Folge einer ringförmigen Sonnenfinsternis, bei der sich die Sonne fast komplett hinter dem Mond versteckt. Thomas Läber mit Sophie.
Früh raus mussten die Hobbyastronomen auf den Philippinen. Schon kurz nach Sonnenaufgang schob sich der Mond vor die strahlende Scheibe. Ganz verdecken konnte er sie aber nicht. Der Mond ist zu klein, um die ganze Sonne zu füllen. Wir werden am Rand immer etwas von ihr sehen. In Japan und Hongkong hatten sich Hunderttausende versammelt, die erwartungsvoll, aber auch ziemlich skeptisch in den Himmel blickten. 3 Minuten vor der Finsternis gab es noch ganz dicke Wolken, aber dann kam die Sonne raus. Ich bin so froh. Von Asien zog die Sonnenfinsternis über den Nordpazifik bis in den Westen der USA, wo ebenfalls tausende Zuschauer das kosmische Schattenspiel feierten. Etwas Großes passiert in diesem Universum genau jetzt, wenn wir zugucken. Mein Gott, was für ein Ereignis. Bei uns in Deutschland wird eine totale Sonnenfinsternis erst wieder in 70 Jahren zu beobachten sein.
John Zarella has been keeping an eye on all the preparations leading up to the launch, and he joins us now from our bureau in Miami, Florida. John, thanks for being with us on this very early morning, very early Tuesday morning for us here on CNN. Liftoff is expected to take place in just under 14 minutes.
Yeah, and, you know, everything right now, the weather is perfect at the Kennedy Space Center up at Cape Canaveral, which is actually where they are launching from. You know, a little bit of a distinction between the Kennedy Space Center, where the shuttle's launched, and just down the road a few miles where Elon Musk, the CEO of SpaceX, and his team have their Falcon 9 rocket on the launch pad there with the Dragon capsule on top. And, you know, as you mentioned, they did abort on Saturday morning. There was a valve in one of the engines, engine number 5. They have 9 engines on that Falcon rocket, and a valve stuck out of place, and so they went ahead and aborted literally at half a second before liftoff is when the computer system shut down the Falcon 9 rocket. And so this really is unprecedented territory, and a lot of people in the space business right now are holding their breath and just waiting for this historic moment. And I had a chance to sit down and talk about 3 weeks ago with the CEO of SpaceX, Elon Musk, about this venture.
We've done everything we possibly can think of to ensure the success of this mission. Despite that, there's still a significant risk.
Risk because only a handful of nations have ever done this before. And before now, no commercial company has ever attempted it. Once in orbit, the unmanned SpaceX Dragon capsule will head for a rendezvous with the International Space Station. If all is well, after a series of systems checks and maneuvers, NASA astronaut Don Pettit will use the station's robotic arm to reach out, grab hold of Dragon, and berth it to the station.
It's been a very hard technology to develop, and of course we need to prove that we've done it correctly, and I think there's a good chance that we don't quite succeed on the first time, but I'm confident we will succeed on, if it's not the first, it'll be the second or third.
There is, quite literally, a lot riding on this. With limited dollars, NASA decided to retire the shuttle, develop a new rocket to take humans on deep space missions, say to Mars, and turn over to commercial companies the job of ferrying cargo and eventually astronauts to the station. Several companies are developing vehicles for the job. SpaceX is the first ready to try.
So it can actually carry the same number of people as the space shuttle.
Last year, Musk showed off his Dragon spacecraft that successfully orbited the Earth, a precursor to the upcoming mission. Musk, the billionaire co-founder of PayPal, has no illusions when it comes to rocket science.
When I started SpaceX, it's not as though I thought rockets were easy. I mean, I did think they were very hard. But I would say it ended up being even harder than that.
So Musk, you know, he's a very interesting character, Manita. His history is he's South African by descent, grew up and went to school in the United States. He actually is a scientist, and, you know, he's got several degrees, and one in business, one in, I believe it's either physics or chemistry. So quite an interesting individual. Also the founder of Tesla Motors, a car company that makes electric cars. So he's got his hands in all kinds of new ventures, and so in fact, he's right there in the control room that they have out in California. They have a control room in Hawthorne, California, just outside of Los Angeles. So he and a team are huddled there, and then he has a team at the at Cape Canaveral as well. And now we're getting there under 10 minutes now until launch, and everything looks to be going just perfectly. Manita?
I love the fact that he'd said that he always knew that dealing with rockets wouldn't be easy. I mean, it is rocket science after all. We can use that in the truest form of that expression. That said, why did they decide to launch it at this time, middle of the night there where you are?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, it's interesting because they only have, not only in the middle of the night, but the launch window is actually 1 second. They have to get off at the precise second. And all of that has to do with the orbiting space station, which is 220, 240 miles above the Earth. And they have to be able to get off the ground at the exact second in order to get into a proper orbit, in order to catch up and intercept the space station so they can do this docking. You know, when the space shuttle launched, it had a 10-minute launch window. A little bit bigger because the space station had more power. Space shuttle has more power in it than the smaller rocket. So the way it's always been put to me by NASA scientists is, consider American football, where you have a quarterback throwing a ball to a receiver out in the field who's going out in the field. The quarterback has to throw the ball at the exact precise second in order to for the ball to reach the receiver at exactly the time when the receiver will be at the spot where the ball is. So you understand that you're really trying a very, very precision maneuver here to get into that particular orbit in order to catch up to the space station, so you're in the exact spot in order to rendezvous and hopefully dock, or in this case berth, with the space station in a couple of days. Manita?
You can certainly feel the pressure is on for this private company to get this launched and, launched on time. John, stand by. We just want to head over now to New Jersey and go to David Brody. He's a science and space writer from space.com. He joins us now from Edgewater in New Jersey. Thank you so much for being with us. We talk a lot about the competition side of it all. It was very competitive. I guess space exploration was very competitive when it came to national pride for countries themselves to be amongst the first to develop the kind of technology to be able to travel into space. What kind of competition are we talking about when we talk about private companies?
Sure. Well, SpaceX does have some competitors in the space, no pun intended, for different kinds of capability. For what they're doing today, which NASA calls commercial cargo, which is run under the COTS program, the Commercial Orbital Space Transportation Program. Their principal competitor would be Orbital Sciences, but they also have the Dragon capsule, right, which they're intending to human rate to be able to fly up to 7 crew back and forth to space station. And for that, there are more competitors in the space, but it's a little further out in time. So Blue Origin, company founded by Jeff Bezos of Amazon fame. Sierra Nevada is a company that's proposed to do a winged vehicle, not so much like the shuttle, but still a winged vehicle. There's Excalibur Almaz. Boeing, the big aerospace giant, is in the game. ATK, formerly known as Thiokol, which produced the solid rocket motors that ran the space shuttle program, and even the United Launch Alliance, the big aerospace consortium that was spun off from Boeing and Lockheed Martin, are all competitors loosely in this space. But the nice part about space is there's a whole lot of it, and there are a whole lot of jobs to do. So we envision a space program where all of these folks are specializing in what they do best, and all of them can go fly, and the program just gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yes, certainly the sky is not the limit here when we're talking about space travel and exploration. In terms of what kind of return we can expect from a massive investment like this, we're talking about millions of dollars here that a company would have to invest in order to get something like. What did they get out of it, aside from the, I guess, the bragging rights to be able to do something like this?
Well, the idea, Manita, is eventually to get commercial contracts with NASA and the other international space agencies around the world at first, and then company-to-company business, actually building a space-based infrastructure to go do things that make money in space. What could some of those things be? Well, we've heard recently that there's a company that is starting the very beginning of asteroid mining. Well, why would you want to mine an asteroid? Well, the first thing that you want to do to build a space infrastructure is to have a gas station in space. Asteroids, it turns out, have a lot of volatile ices, notably water, break water apart into hydrogen and oxygen, and you get rocket fuel and rocket propellant, rocket oxidizer. You also get life support from the oxygen, and you get water to drink. So if you're going to expand space, one of the hot commodities is water. It costs you a lot of money to truck it up from the ground. A lot of what's on the SpaceX vehicle today is propellant mass. Well, what if that propellant mass was already in orbit and you could just go grab it and go someplace? That's how we're going to explore deep space. That's how we're going to open up the solar system. And eventually there are a couple very small number of materials that are so valuable, that are abundant in space and rare on the ground, that there may be an economic case for bringing some of them back. some of the platinum group metals. But it remains to be seen if that's a business model that'll really work.
Amazing indeed. David, okay, stand by for us. We are approaching just under 4 minutes, almost 3.5 minutes now before liftoff. We are taking a short break here on CNN. When we come back, again, we will continue our live coverage of the countdown to the historic SpaceX launch in just a minute. Stay with us. Live pictures there of Cape Canaveral Air Force Station in Florida and our special coverage of an historic launch by SpaceX. The company is trying the first launch of a private spacecraft to the International Space Station. We want to welcome our viewers around the world, including the United States. Of course, we want to take you also to John Zarella, who is a man who's very well versed in these kind of space explorations and these kind of experiments, we should say. This was supposed to happen over the weekend, John, but it failed, and now they have a 1-second precision time to be able to get this into space.
Yeah, we have 1 second. That's the launch time they have. You know, you cannot underestimate the criticality of getting this right. If not this time, the next time. Because, you know, to validate what NASA did, NASA decided it couldn't afford to fly the space shuttle and to develop a big new rocket and a spacecraft to take humans to asteroids and onto Mars. So what NASA did was they said, okay, we're going to turn over to the commercial companies all of this flying to low Earth orbit, taking cargo, taking astronauts to the International Space Station, and we're going to concentrate on what we do best. So right now it looks like we're closing in on the launch. The countdown clock is still ticking. We're going to go and listen in to George Diller, the voice of launch control.
All propellant tanks at pressure.
T-minus 20.
Fire X is on.
T-minus 15 seconds.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. And launch of the SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket as NASA turns to the private sector to resupply the International Space Station.
Starting gravity turn. First stage engines at full power, looking good.
We have a solid telemetry link and the power systems are nominal.
First stage propellant utilization is active.
Eagle's on a nominal trajectory. Altitude 5.3 kilometers, velocity 225 meters per second, and downrange distance of 0.6 of a kilometer. Vehicle is supersonic.
So the Falcon 9 is on the way with that Dragon capsule on top of it. That's quite a fascinating shot there, Manita, when you see that starburst effect with those 9 engines still powering this Falcon rocket on its way to the rendezvous with the International Space Station. And, you know, what's interesting about this is the next big milestone we've got comes up at about 9 minutes in when the Dragon capsule is actually free-flying after the engines have burned out, the first, second stage have burned out, and Dragon is on its way in orbit, and it will have to unfold its solar panels in order to produce more energy, in order to produce more power itself on its own to go ahead and continue on to the International Space Station. So that's going to be a big moment as well. It's when it unfurls those solar panels. But now, one of the things that we can take away from all of this as we continue to see, after lighting up the night sky, that it is continuing on its journey into space, that once they rendezvous with the space station in a couple of days, what they are going to do is they're going to have the Dragon capsule fly around and under the space station, checking out the systems, making sure everything is working all right, making sure a radar called LIDAR on the space station is operating, because that radar is going to help the astronauts on the space station guide the Dragon capsule in to the space station. It monitors and checks the distances between the capsule, between the Dragon and the ISS. And then, this is not in the traditional sense a docking. When we think of a docking with the space station, and there you go, fantastic shot we just saw there of the separation of that first stage as it burned out. We think of that the docking, when a vehicle actually, like the space shuttle, docks with the International Space Station. In this case, what they are going to do is berth with the space station. What that means is that Don Pettit, the astronaut, U.S. astronaut on the station, he will reach out with the station's robotic arm when the Dragon gets close enough to the station, and he will grab it. He'll grapple it, and then he will pull it in to the ISS, and then it will be berthed to the ISS. So a little bit of different terminology than a traditional docking would be. This is a berthing, but they've done this before. They know how to do it, so that should go well. But first things first, they've got to get in orbit. They've got to be in an orbit with the Dragon capsule in order to reach the ISS. And then from that point on, not only that, then, Manita, they've got to be able to do some testing first, make sure all the systems are working, and then they'll go ahead and try the berthing. Manita?
Absolutely fascinating. John, stand by. I just want to remind our viewers what they're looking at right now. This has been the successful, we should say right now, the launch, the private launch of the Falcon 9 rocket to the International Space Station. Of course, it's a huge step for private companies, mankind, we should say, to be able to do this without government funding. We are, of course, keeping an eye on this for our viewers in the United States. We thank you for joining us. We want to continue our coverage of this historic moment. And John, how different would this be, say, because it is private, how different in terms of the technology would this be from, say, if NASA or any other government-funded operation was to be involved?
Well, certainly the difference is that NASA still has to kind of sign off on the technology. They're not going to allow down the road, for instance, U.S. astronauts to get into a vehicle that they have not man-rated and they have not signed off on. So these companies are working hand in hand with the U.S. Space Agency. But don't forget, space shuttle technology was 30 years old. This technology is brand new, these companies are bringing to the table, particularly software. You know, rocket science is still rocket science. You've got to have thrust, you've got to have power to get these big masses off the ground. But when it comes to things like flying in space and docking and berthing and all of those things that require incredible computing power and software power, all of those things are the most modern of technology, far more sophisticated than what the space shuttle carried when it was built.
All right, John, we want to go now to David Brody. He's a science and space writer from space.com. He joins us now from Edgewater in New Jersey. And David, we look at this and we could say that this would be a successful launch so far. What should we be looking for in the next few minutes and few hours ahead?
Well, it'll take the better part of a day, maybe a little more than a day, for the Dragon capsule to catch up with Space Station and begin to execute those maneuvers that John brilliantly outlined. And so it's kind of we experienced a hurry up and wait. Now we're in a waiting period. It's kind of a minor nail-biting time for the folks at SpaceX in Hawthorne, but it looks like they've got a perfectly clean vehicle. So as John says, if the solar panels deploy correctly, that's a major milestone. Not much will happen over the next day. And then, of course, we hope that we'll get a successful berthing and a successful cargo transfer. The notable thing about the Dragon capsule is that currently it's the only way to bring anything down from the space station other than astronauts. Of course, the Soyuz, Russian Soyuz capsule is the way that astronauts and cosmonauts, presumably Chinese daikonauts at some point, will get back and forth. But right now you can't bring any significant cargo down except with Dragon, the Russian Progress vehicle, burns up in the atmosphere. Likewise, the European ATV, the Japanese HTV. So it may turn out, if this mission is successful, that all of a sudden commercial space has brought a capability to the space program that it did not have. It's not replacing a government technology. It's actually introducing a brand new way to do things. So that's pretty exciting.
David, thank you very much for being with us. Really appreciate you being part of our coverage here. And John, we want to go, before we leave, before we finish this coverage, a special coverage of this, I want to ask you this. You know, you've been covering the space beat for a very long time. I want to ask you, what is it about this that excites you?
Well, I think, as David was pointing out, it is a new era. This is if you're looking at this and watching CNN and CNN Domestic, and you're watching this event unfold, what you are watching is history. A whole new chapter, a whole new era in space flight. Commercial companies are like, for lack of a better term, the Wright brothers. You know, I mean, this is what it's all about. Flying into space now in low Earth orbit, commercial companies doing that, turning over to NASA what NASA does best, trying to get humans to Mars, trying to get humans to an asteroid. Coming up on stage 2 separation here, very likely before we get to the top of the hour. And then once you're done with stage 2 separation, and as David was pointing out there, looks like a very, very clean vehicle, flying perfectly. And as soon as they get to stage 2 separation, then we will move to the solar panel array opening on the Dragon capsule, which would be the next major milestone. And then the cruise phase as they cruise to their rendezvous with the International Space Station. Manita?
In terms of how critical each stage is, we understand that obviously each stage is very critical when we look at the separation phase now, but in terms of the safety side, have we passed that stage where we can actually take a breath?
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, as far as this particular launch goes, you know, anything can go wrong during the course of a launch, but generally speaking, while you're on those big rockets and you're firing all that thrust and you're getting up into orbit, that's where you're going to and could have the biggest you know, issues. Once you're in this cruise phase, you're in pretty good shape, and you can see in there in the control center they just had the high five, you know, by all of those folks at SpaceX in their launch control room there down at Cape Canaveral. I'm not clear which one of that one looks like the Cape. They may have had a shot from their Hawthorne, California facility. And again, Manita, you know, that goes back to the incredible technology that exists now, where you don't have to be sitting at the Kennedy Space Center, basically, you know, to call the shots on a launch. You can be in Hawthorne, California, where Elon Musk was on Saturday morning with his team, and you can make your decisions on whether you're launching or not launching from there. You don't have to be sitting in a control room at Cape Canaveral or the Kennedy Space Center.
And so give us again, John, an idea of what exactly will be happening once it actually gets to the International Space Station.
The first thing they're going to do is they're going to run some series of tests where they will fly underneath the space station at a considerable distance, but to make sure that all of the systems, the berthing systems, all of the computer systems on board the station and on board the Dragon in particular are working. Once they have a sense that all of that is working, then the next day, in the very wee hours of the morning, like we are, then they will attempt to actually berth to the station. And what they're going to do is they will bring the Dragon capsule very close to the station, close enough that U.S. astronaut Don Pettit on the International Space Station will use the ISS's robotic arm. He'll reach out. There's a grapple point, as they call it, on the Dragon. He'll grab it with the arm, and he will slowly, very slowly, pull it into the space station and then berth it. And we'll have a successful mission.
Well, they certainly have a great team there on the ground. They're all congratulating themselves, as they should, on a very successful launch. And I have a great team here joining me on CNN. John Zarella, David Brody, thank you, gentlemen, both for being with us on this special coverage of the historic SpaceX launch. World Business Today starts next. We leave you now with images of that historic launch.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. And launch of the SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket as NASA turns to the private sector to resupply the International Space Station.
T-minus 30 seconds.
All propellant tanks at pressure.
T-minus 20.
Fire X is on.
T-minus 15 seconds.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. And launch of the SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket as NASA turns to the private sector to resupply the International Space Station.
Starting gravity turn.
First stage engines at full power. Looking good.
We have a solid telemetry link and the power systems are nominal.
First stage propellant utilization is active.
Vehicles on a nominal trajectory. Altitude 5.3 kilometers, velocity 225 meters per second, and downrange distance of 0.6 of a kilometer. Vehicle is supersonic. Vehicle has reached maximum aerodynamic pressure.
Propulsion's performing nominally, starting stage 2 engine chill.
We have a solid RF link and power systems are nominal.
Vehicles on a nominal trajectory, 30 kilometers altitude, 1 kilometer per second velocity, and downrange distance 20 kilometers.
Dragon power systems are nominal.
Vehicles on a nominal trajectory, 53 kilometers altitude, 1.7 kilometers per second velocity, and downrange distance of 51 kilometers.
Approaching MECO 1. MECO 1, planned shutdown on engines 1 and 9.
First stage impact point past mid-MECO.
MECO 2.
Nominal velocity at MECO.
Stage set confirmed.
And back ignition confirmed.
The Dragon nose cone has been jettisoned.
Stage 2 propulsion systems nominal.
Vehicle remains on a nominal trajectory, 176 kilometers altitude, velocity of 3 kilometers per second, downrange distance 320 kilometers.
And power systems are nominal, and we still have a solid telemetry link.
OSM, this LC, please move to net A.
Stage 2 propellant utilization is active.
Vehicle remains on a nominal trajectory, 220 kilometers altitude, 3.4 kilometers per second, and downrange distance of 470 kilometers.
Second stage propulsion performing as expected.
Second stage power systems looking good, and we have a solid telemetry link.
Vehicle remains on a nominal trajectory, 269 kilometers in altitude, velocity of 4 kilometers per second, and a downrange distance of 712 kilometers.
MVAC and stage 2 performance is good.
Vehicle remains on a nominal trajectory, 300 kilometers in altitude, velocity of 5 kilometers per second, and downrange distance of 1,000 kilometers. IMU sensor remains healthy, and GPS lock is verified.
And we are picking up data from New Hampshire.
Vehicles in terminal guidance. Vehicles pass through the European gate.
FTS is saved.
MVAC shutdown confirmed.
Falcon 9 and Dragon are in orbit.
Dragon is in separation state.
Wait.
Apogee 346 kilometers, perigee 297 kilometers.
And the
1.66 degrees.
Cameras forward.
solar array deployment should start in about a minute.
Start of payload settling deploy.
.30 seconds from solar array deployment.
Dragon solar array deployment has started. Solar arrays have deployed. LD, MD on countdown.
LD's on a phone call right now, MD.
Yeah, copy that, LC. We're going to be switching off countdown net. Thanks for a ride.
Okay. Good luck.
Dragon has started its attitude and maneuver towards Tetris.
This is Falcon 9 launch control, 14 minutes, 14 seconds into the mission. Solar arrays have deployed. The Initial planned orbit in miles is 193.7 by 212.5 at an inclination of 51.6. And the apogee, or the high point of that orbit, is just below the ISS by about 37 miles. We're going to go out now to the International Space Station control room in Houston for an update from commentator Brandy Dean.
Thanks, George, and welcome back to Mission Control Houston, where all eyes of the International Space Station Flight Control Team have been focused on the views of the launch of what will hopefully in just a couple of days become the first commercial vehicle to dock to the International Space Station.